Chapter 379. Qiu Jianhan chuckled dryly. You don't have to worry, but this is a difficult problem for me to deal with. If he were 10 years old and knew how to differentiate between good and evil, it wouldn't be too difficult to deal with even though there are problems. However, a child of only 2.5 years old. Those women in the palace and the people of the royal family, they may only be idiots when it comes to fighting on the battlefield, but when it comes to fighting for power, scheming, and fighting for favor, they are the most ruthless people in the world. Killing in a joking manner, sweet-mouthing, betraying the alliance and being merciless, these are the most common things to do. Qiu Jianhan chuckled humorlessly. This old man isn't willing to talk about this, but if you've decided to hand the child over to me to train and teach, this old man has no choice but to talk about it. Yunyang nodded slowly. This child's existence is a direct threat to all the princes, especially His Highness the Crown Prince, the current emperor. This will undoubtedly infuriate the entire palace. Qiu Jianhan lifted his head to look at Yunyang. The immediate consequence is that all the factions will join hands to deal with him, to target him. They will go all out to target him. Yunyang smiled meaningfully. This is not a problem. Wouldn't it solve the problem once and for all if all the factions were to be wiped out? Qiu Jianhan was stunned. With his decades of experience and knowledge, he could think of at least a dozen effective and constructive answers, but he had never thought of such a plan. Wipe out all the factions. So extreme? One had to know that these factions, their manpower, forces, and even their armies were already a shocking number, even if one were to disregard their combat power. The number was enough to damage Yutang's foundation. How could they be wiped out so easily? Yunyang chuckled softly. I've given you the solution, and the most important message has been conveyed. Yunyang stood up. Old Marshal, I'll leave the rest to you to decide. I'll come back within 2 or 3 days. The old marshal sprung up like his bottom was on fire and said angrily, You're throwing such a huge matter to me and you're leaving just like that? Are you King playing rogue with this old man? Yunyang turned around and said, It's a pleasure to show off in front of an expert. It's a pleasure to play the rogue with the leader of the capital's top 3 rogues, why not? I also feel that this matter is troublesome, but rather than being happy alone, it is better to be happy together. Qiu Jianhan was speechless again. What the *ck, why not? What was there to be happy about? This was clearly an incomparable shock, okay? Where is the child now? Qiu Jianhan asked. Of course in a very, very safe place, said Yunyang. Qiu Jianhan was speechless. I meant the exact location. This is not something you should know now. Forgive me for not telling you, Yunyang said. The sound of heavy breathing came from behind him. The old man was obviously about to explode from anger. It's important for you to sort out your thoughts and make a decision. There's no need to think too far ahead. It's even more meaningless. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Yunyang appeared in a flash, turning into a gust of wind right in front of the old marshal, drifting away through the gap of the sealed window. Should we report this matter to His Majesty now? Qiu Jianhan asked immediately. This was actually what the old marshal wanted to know the most, hoping to get a definite answer. After all, His Majesty the Emperor had hoped more than anyone else that the eldest prince could have a descendant. If His Majesty were to know about this news, he would be elated at the most conservative estimate, even dancing with joy. However, what answered him was only the howling of the chilly wind outside the window. It was obvious that Lord Supreme Wind had already left without a trace. This meant that he did not care. I've told you the news. If you want to inform His Majesty the Emperor, go ahead. If you don't want to, don't. Everything is up to you. Bastard. Qiu Jianhan kicked the chair that Lord Supreme Wind had just sat on and glared at the old marshal. Aren't you deliberately tormenting this old man? If Yu Peiza knew that this old man didn't inform him about his eldest grandson at once, he would definitely make things difficult for this old man. The old marshal was agitated. He actually dared to call His Majesty the Emperor by his name. For a moment, he paced around the study like a headless fly. The more he walked, the more agitated he became. The old marshal was already in a bad mood, and the war ahead had already made him feel as if he was treading on thin ice. Now, another shocking and rare thing had happened. Yet, the fellow who had informed him about this had run away just like that. He had left everything to himself. To inform His Majesty the Emperor about the unfavorable consequences? Putting aside the question of whether Supreme Wind would pursue his decision, just the thought of His Majesty's deep regret and remorse, would the Emperor be overjoyed and dancing with joy if he knew about this? Perhaps not. Old Marshal Qiu shuddered involuntarily, obviously frightened by some of his own thoughts. Not telling His Majesty the Emperor though? Temporarily hiding it? If His Majesty were to find out about it in the future, his punishment would be secondary. Most importantly, this matter would definitely affect His Majesty the Emperor's final plan and decision. For a satisfactory successor and a dissatisfied successor, the arrangements and decisions made by the successor would be completely different, or even in completely opposite directions. However, this matter should not be delayed. It was better to make a decision early and end it as soon as possible. Then, sigh. No matter how much the old marshal did not want to sigh, he could not help but sigh heavily. He put on his clothes with a dark expression. Just as he was about to walk out, he realized that it was already past midnight. Even if the old man had the authority to enter the palace at this time, he had to be mindful of the consequences, especially the attention of those with ulterior motives. Let's wait until tomorrow morning. Let me think about it carefully. How can I minimize the impact and stimulation? Qiu Jianhan sat in the study, sighing for the entire night. He had not thought of a solution until the morning assembly, causing him to be drowsy throughout the morning assembly. During the morning court session, the Grand Court Assembly began. His Majesty the Emperor was glowing, looking hale and hearty and unusually energetic. Faced with the Empire of Dongxuan's incessant provocations at the border and the various enlistments in Dongxian, all of them indicated that a great war was imminent. Besides, Han Sanhe was obviously forced to the edge of a cliff this time and was in desperate need of a victory to redeem his reputation. He would definitely go all out and would not return without a victory. To the Empire of Yutong, this was undoubtedly a huge test. Fu Baoguo's war report had already arrived in the imperial court. All the civil and military officials in the imperial court were listening to the report quietly. Dongxian has mobilized the entire nation. A fierce battle is inevitable. Dongxuan's troop deployment this time will be of an unprecedented scale. Han Sanhe will go all out in this war due to the pressure. This official can only meet the enemy head-on. However, the war this time is dangerous. This official dare not say that victory is certain. I can only fight with my life on the line. If this war is won, this official may be lucky enough to survive. If not, the day we break through will be the day this official dies. Dongxian is a powerful force. This official does not wish to say anything that would tarnish our army's reputation. I sincerely hope that the nation is prepared. The short letter did not contain any words about asking for help. There were only words of loyalty and passion. Just by reading this letter, one could imagine Fu Baoguo's determination to fight to the death this time. Once the letter was completed, the imperial court was silent for a long time. Even some of the civil officials who usually treated the military generals with disdain were solemn at this moment. The atmosphere now was filled with a sense of heroism. No one, no organization, no force could point fingers at them. They could not be blamed. Reorganize the army and set off at any time. His Majesty the Emperor came to a conclusion quickly and said loudly, Yutong's hundreds of millions of men would rather die in battle than watch the eastern defense be defeated and the battlefront collapse. A few generals stepped forward together. This official requests to be sent to war. This official requests to be sent to war. This official requests to be sent to war. Fu Baoguo is not the only soldier in Yutong's military who will die. This official requests to be sent to war. I dare to die. In the Golden Hall, the crowd was bubbling with passion and passion. It was an unprecedented spectacle. The passionate passion contained in the letter and the courage to die had ignited the passion of all the martial men in the imperial court. For a moment, these generals who had been on the battlefield and had been through hundreds of battles were exhilarated as if they had been injected with adrenaline. Fu Baoguo is not the only good man in Yutong. There are countless men in the empire of Yutong. When have we not fallen behind others? For the country and the people, what harm is there in dying in battle? With this body, I am willing to protect the country and my family, until the day I die. Qiu Jianhan lifted his bewildered eyes to take a look amidst the chaos, wondering, what are these people so worked up about? Why are they all so passionate? Sigh, how should I tell His Majesty about this? I'm so worried. The old marshal was bewitched. His Majesty the Emperor raised his hands and pressed them down gently. The entire hall was silent. Dongxian has mobilized the entire nation to invade. Han Sanhe is personally leading the army and going all out. So what? His Majesty the Emperor looked at them proudly. Yutong has hundreds of millions of hot-blooded men. Good men who aren't afraid of death. Why should we fear any challenge in this world? The entire nation is mobilized to fight Dongxuan's Han Sanhe to the death. To fight Dongxuan's Han Sanhe to the death. The crowd cheered after His Majesty the Emperor, feeling their blood boil uncontrollably for a long time. There was only one person who was in a daze, his mind unfocused. His eyes would stare at the ceiling of the hall sometimes as if he was sleepwalking. Sometimes, he would lower his head as if he was worried about the nation and its people. Many of them thought it was odd. Why did they not hear the old marshal's roar today? Was he not here? After the court was dismissed, His Majesty left Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin, the two old marshals, to discuss matters alone. His Majesty was obviously preoccupied, not even noticing that Qiu Jianhan had been brought in like a walking corpse. His demeanor was definitely not normal. Leng Daoyin, on the other hand, had been thinking about the war and did not notice it either. Only the eunuchs and guards in the palace had noticed it. Qiu Jianhan seemed to be drifting, following the emperor in a daze. He was like a wooden puppet, brought into the royal study in a daze. The guards dared to bet that old Marshal Qiu had no idea where he was right now. Chapter 380. As for Fang Qingtian and Grand Commandant Fang Qingtian, the old Grand Commandant was not feeling well due to the heavy snow these few days, so he was still resting at home today. The emperor had no intention of inviting him over. The old Grand Commandant did not have much time left. If something like this were to trigger his state of mind, he might not be able to take the blow. The old man's unique skill, ingenious heart, was a mystical cultivation method that could see through one's heart, but it was a taboo against the violent fluctuation of one's state of mind. The old Grand Commandant had activated ingenious heart because of Yang Buotao's case. It did not look like anything was out of the ordinary then, but it was still a considerable burden and his lifespan was depleted. If he were to be triggered again now, it would not be good. After all, Fu Baoguo was the only remaining disciple of the old Grand Commandant, the one who was seen as his successor. The other disciples of the old Grand Commandant had all perished on the battlefield, their corpses buried on the battlefield. If he were to suddenly hear that Fu Baoguo was about to face the all-out attack of Dongshuan's god of war Han Sanhe, and that something bad had happened to him, Yutong would be in even more dire straits. "How is the battle?" asked His Majesty. When there were only 2 or 3 officials left in the hall, His Majesty no longer acted as if everything was within his grasp. The worry was written all over his face. "This battle is not optimistic." Leng Daoyin sucked in a deep breath and spat out a long white dragon. The weather was too cold. Even though they were in the palace, the hall was too spacious. "Yes, I know that this battle is not optimistic, but why would Dongshin choose this time to attack? He doesn't have absolute benefits to speak of." His Majesty's frown was tight as well. Is it because of the collective attack on Han Sanhe that the old thing went crazy and caused the current situation? His Majesty grumbled, "I really can't figure out what the ruler of Dongshin is thinking. If he really doesn't like Han Sanhe, he could just wipe out his entire family. Why did he have to let this old thing lead the army? It's the middle of winter now, it's a world of ice and snow. Why would he deploy the army at this time?" "Your Majesty is right. We have the advantage of time compared to Dongshin. The winter season is easy to defend and hard to attack. This is our pure advantage." Leng Daoyin mused with a frown, "But this advantage isn't obvious. The eastern defense line is just a newly built pass. It might not be able to withstand the army's relentless assault. This will be the crux of the final victory and defeat of this battle. For now, this will be the crux of victory and defeat." His Majesty frowned. Fu Baoguo has only been there for a little more than a month. His lack of familiarity and stability is also a huge problem. On the other hand, there's no problem with domestic provisions, fodder, and military equipment. Leng Daoyin sighed heavily. "In the end, we have the right timing in this battle. As long as the main general can hold his ground and not make any rash moves, this battle will only be a bleak one." As he turned to Qiu Jianhan, "Qiu, what do you think?" "Daoyin Jian." The Commandant Qiu. Jiu, frowned Jiu as he. Leng Daoyin gave him a slap. "Old thing, are you sleepwalking?" Emperor and to Emperor Commandant Leng Dao. Of to Commandant of Emperor Leng and Mon, Emperor and Emperor. His Majesty and Leng Daoyin were stunned. No more internal strife? Where did this sentence come from? Where did this come from? We're talking about foreign aggression, okay? How could you say that out of nowhere? What was going on? What was this old man thinking? Why was he so lost in thought? What are you talking about? You were haunted by a nightmare yesterday and you're still talking in your sleep now? Leng Daoyin frowned in displeasure. Qiu Jianhan opened his eyes in confusion. What? His Majesty held his forehead with one hand and looked like he had a headache. Leng Daoyin was flabbergasted. He would never have thought that the old man would actually be so distracted just now. What are you trying to do? You're actually distracted in such an important inner palace debate? We're talking about the war in the east. Lung Daoyin said weakly, why don't you say something, you old thing? Everyone knew that he was provoking old Marshal Chiu by saying that his voice was equivalent to a fart. According to the normal development, it should be the banter between the rogues to ease the awkward atmosphere just now. Unexpectedly, what did I say? What did I say? Chiu Jianhan was still a little dazed, but with a jolt, he said repeatedly, that's right, you should. You should. His Majesty could not help spitting out the tea that he had just drunk and coughed as he listened to the incongruous words. I surrender to you. Lung Daoyin wiped away the tea that His Majesty had splashed all over his face, speechless and resentful. Oh, you're talking about the war with the Empire of Dongxian? Chiu Jianhan panted. I understand now. This isn't a big deal. With Fu Baoguo around and the depth of war, even if there's a slight loss, it won't shake the nation. It's fine if we take care of the logistics and be ready to send reinforcements. It's still very optimistic, no big deal. His Majesty and Lung Daoyin looked at each other. Optimistic? Very optimistic? This isn't a big deal? What is a big deal then? How is it not a big deal? This could easily shake the nation's foundation. Could it be that the old man was thinking of something even more serious than this? Something more serious than shaking the nation's foundation? Could it be something that could subjugate the nation? Both of them looked calm, but their hearts were in their throats. What were you thinking about just now? Spit it out and let us broaden our horizons. Lung Daoyin asked straightforwardly as he scratched his head. Even if we can broaden our horizons, it has nothing to do with you. You can leave now. Old Marshal Chiu rolled his eyes and impatiently ordered the guest to leave on behalf of His Majesty. Lung Daoyin almost exploded. *CK. You can leave now. You old thing, you're too daring. How dare you ask me to leave in front of His Majesty? Do you think I'm your son? You? Lung Daoyin was panting. Why aren't you leaving yet? Chiu Jianhan's eyes were wide open, slightly confused. Can't you see that this old man wants to discuss national and military affairs with His Majesty? Oh, it's old Lung. It was as if he had only just realized who Lung Daoyin was. He said apologetically, Forgive me. I didn't see it was you just now. Lung Daoyin fell backward. He looked at Chiu Jianhan like he had seen a ghost. What the *CK did you say? You said you didn't know it was me? What are you talking about? I've gone to court with you, we've discussed matters together, we've been summoned here by His Majesty, we've talked for half a day. You actually didn't know it was me who was talking to you? But this matter is really important. Even you have to leave now. The old marshal patted Lung Daoyin's shoulder apologetically. You better leave now, be serious. Lung Daoyin glared for a good while before he said through gritted teeth, I want to tell you this, damned old man, but I don't know if I should say it now. Even I have to leave now. *CK me. Does your family know you're so arrogant? Isn't your family afraid that you'll be beaten to death if you go out like this? Lung Daoyin felt like he was about to faint. This is too embarrassing. Chiu Jianhan exchanged a look with His Majesty the Emperor. Seeing that old Marshal Chiu had snapped out of his trance, His Majesty the Emperor could not understand the severity of what he had just said. Something that could cause Chiu Jianhan to be so disoriented and distracted was definitely not a trivial matter. Perhaps it really involved the destruction of the nation? His Majesty the Emperor was startled. He could not care less about the niceties any more as he said in a low voice, Marshal Lung, please wait outside the hall for a while. If this matter isn't that important, I'll call you in then and we'll beat him up together. This isn't a place where you can act like a rogue. It was unprecedented for His Majesty the Emperor to say so. Lung Daoyin pinched his nose. All right. I'll go down and wait. He glared at Chiu Jianhan and said fiercely, Old bastard. Just you wait for your old man. Only then did he leave reluctantly. It was only then that he left reluctantly. He had completely forgotten that what he had said just now seemed to have included himself in the scolding as well. What was an old bastard's old man? Wasn't he still a bastard? And an old bastard at that. Lung Daoyin left with a face full of displeasure. His emotions were written all over his face. However, following Marshal Lung's departure, His Majesty the Emperor's expression turned grim. What happened? Why are you acting like this today? Chiu Jianhan had even sent Lung Daoyin away. It was obvious that the matter in his heart was no trivial matter. It was an important one. In Chiu Jianhan's heart, this matter was even more important than the upcoming Eastern Defense War. What could it be? At the thought of this, Even the emperor felt an indescribable sense of nervousness in his heart. He could vaguely feel that the matter that Qiu Jianhan was worried about was related to himself and the royal family, but what could it be exactly? This matter? Old Marshal Qiu was still thinking if he should say it now. Was it right to chase Leng Daoyin out in a hurry just now? Also, and most importantly, what would be the consequences if he really said it? Just as a certain someone was still letting his imagination run wild and deliberating over his words, he suddenly saw His Majesty's gaze. Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan came to a sudden realization. If he were to pull back at the last moment and change the script forcefully, the consequences would be dire. The person in front of him was Yutong's paragon, an existence that could never be teased. It would be fine if he were to play the rogue with him, but if he were to push the matter to a joke now, he would really become a joke. This is what happened. Qiu Jianhan made up his mind. Supreme Wind came to my house last night and told me something important. This matter has kept me up all night. I don't know what to do. Chapter 381. His Majesty grew even more anxious. Has Supreme Wind found something strange again? Is it about the Four Seasons Tower or Dongxian? It must be Dongxian. It's illogical for Dongxian to launch an attack so abruptly. There must be a trap. What's the exact situation? His Majesty's thoughts were running wild as he analyzed the situation, praying in his heart that it would be best if Supreme Wind had found out what Dongshuan's conspiracy was and nothing else. This Lord Supreme Wind had already combed through all of Yutong's high-ranking officials during this period of time. Almost half of the officials in the imperial court had been taken out by him. Yet all of them were incriminating evidence. They were all spies. In the face of this reality, he, the emperor, had already lost a lot of face. He had been an emperor for so many years, but half of his subordinates were actually spies. He had been kept in the dark all this while. How could he endure this? It really isn't related to Dongxian. It's not about the other officials either. Old Marshal Qiu frowned, his expression strange. Oh. His Majesty was relieved. Then what did he look for you for? Another move against the Four Seasons Tower? Not really. He told me something, but I'm hesitating if I should tell His Majesty now. Old Marshal Qiu was still thinking, contemplating and calculating what kind of shock and chaos it would cause once the news was revealed. Even the factions of the princes and even the entire palace would be in a state of panic. That kind of consequence could only be described as difficult to clean up. His Majesty clearly did not realize what he was about to hear. He only sat down in a very relaxed manner and said, "You should just say it. No wonder you sent Leng Daoyin away. It's related to the 9 Supremes. It's indeed not appropriate to let Marshal Leng know about this. I'll find a chance to speak up for you later. I guess this old man is going crazy from anger now." Qiu Jianhan chuckled dryly and said, "What does this have to do with me? Supreme Wind only told me that he had gotten Supreme Waters will not long ago. Supreme Waters will mention something unexpected." Something unexpected. His Majesty raised his head, cracked his neck and said carelessly, "What is it?" This emperor is suddenly very interested. Hurry up and say it. What are you keeping me in suspense for? If you continue to keep me in suspense, be careful that when Marshal Leng scolds you in the future, this emperor will help Marshal Leng. However, His Majesty's tone was full of ridicule. He did not care too much about the so-called unexpected thing. Qiu Jianhan said, "The will clearly states that Supreme Water of the 9 Supremes is actually a woman." His Majesty's neck that was shaking stopped as he looked at Qiu Jianhan. Obviously this news was too unexpected. One of the 9 Supremes whose name shook the world, Supreme Water, was actually a female. It was a shocking secret that no one had discovered for so many years. This was a shocking secret. In spite of this, it was still a personal matter of the 9 Supremes. Whether it was Qiu Jianhan, the royal family, or Yutong, it did not have much to do with them. His Majesty maintained the shock on his face, but his heart was no longer affected. The mind of an emperor had long sharpened his heart to the point that it was harder than metal and stone. He would not be swayed. Once Qiu Jianhan started talking, it was hard to stop. He decided to spill the beans. Since he had already said so much, there was nothing else that he could not say. Not only is Lady Supreme Water a woman, she's already married. Old Marshal Qiu said quickly, "She even has a son." His Majesty was still unperturbed. He did not know what old Marshal Qiu was referring to. Could it be that he was asking for a title and reward for her son? This was not a difficult problem to solve. Qiu Jianhan threw out the main point quickly and said, "Supreme Water's husband is Supreme Earth." After saying this, he felt his entire body lighten up. He had finally said the most crucial thing. What does it matter who the man is? Supreme Earth and Supreme Water are both part of the 9 Supremes. Their marriage is logical and appropriate, a perfect match. It's perfectly normal for a man and a woman to get married. If you had said that the Supremes are married first and then said that Supreme Water is actually a woman, I might. As His Majesty spoke, his teasing tone stopped abruptly. No, it should be more accurate to say that he froze. There was a cracking sound. His neck, which was initially raised in a relaxed manner, turned abruptly to look at Qiu Jianhan, his eyes like a hawk's. However, it was obvious that his neck could not withstand such an intense movement as it let out a loud sound that sounded like his spine had snapped. Then His Majesty froze abruptly. Supreme Water's husband was Supreme Earth. Supreme Water had a son. His Majesty froze for a good while before he suddenly let out an earth-shattering roar. What? Say it again. His roar could be heard by half of the palace. Everyone who heard it shuddered at that moment. Outside, Lung Daoyin, who was waiting for Qiu Jianhan to come out and settle the score with him, was shocked by the earth-shattering roar that came from the hall as well. *CKME. It was actually so serious. His Majesty could actually be so shocked. This matter was no small matter, it was frightening and terrifying. Furthermore, this place had become a place of trouble. He couldn't stay any longer. Now that His Majesty was enraged, it's reasonable for old Tortoise Qiu to be unlucky, but I'm just an innocent bystander. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. It's better for this old man to leave first. With a shudder, Lung Daoyin turned and strode out without looking back. Marshal Lung, don't you want to wait? No, no. This old man suddenly remembered that I have some matters to attend to at home. I'll leave first. I suddenly have a stomachache. I'm not feeling well, maybe? Lung Daoyin disappeared in a flash. Wait to be implicated in the disaster? Even if I don't, I'm not willing to be scolded right in the face. This old man is someone who cares about his reputation, someone who doesn't care about vulgar interests. It's better for old Qiu to shoulder this alone. Good luck, old Qiu. Lung Daoyin disappeared with a swoosh. His speed was so fast that it made the palace guards gasp in awe. He was indeed the marshal. His skills, his speed, his agility, they were truly inferior to him. Otherwise, how could he be Yutong's only second marshal, the second of the capital's top 3 rogues? How impressive. It was just that he looked a little ragged. It had to be an illusion, it had to be an illusion, it had to be an illusion. In the hall. His Majesty the Emperor was no longer mischievous. He had even lost his usual composure and wisdom. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the old marshal, his pupils dilating. His entire face was flushed red like blood, only his lips were pale. His body, which had regained its stability after being cured of the poison, was trembling even though he was still sitting upright. He was like a fallen leaf drifting in the wind. His Majesty's gaze on the old marshal was focused and filled with urgency, clearly wanting a definite answer. Old Marshal Qiu nodded solemnly and said, Your Majesty, you didn't hear wrongly. It is indeed Supreme Earth of the 9 Supremes. The eldest, the union with Supreme Water. They became husband and wife and they gave birth to a son together. Now this little boy is already 2.5 years old. Supreme Earth. The union of Supreme Earth and Supreme Water. Giving birth to a son. 2.5 years old. 2.5 years old. These words were like thunderclaps ringing in the emperor's ears, making him dizzy and unable to distinguish between north, south, east, and west. He could only hear his own rapid breaths that sounded like bellows. His Majesty's chest was filled with the sound of breathing. His Majesty grabbed the armrest of the throne uncontrollably. The strength he exerted was so great that the sturdy throne was left with a handprint. It was confirmed. There was. At this moment, His Majesty did not even know what he was feeling. He felt his mind go blank while the world before him exploded in a riot of colors. After a long while, when the explosion of colors had passed, His Majesty finally caught his breath. His emotions were extremely complicated. He wanted to howl and laugh into the sky, but he also wanted to fall to the ground and cry. He wanted to burn incense and worship his ancestors, to thank the gods and sages for their blessings. He was stunned for a long time before he suddenly collapsed on the throne. His normal sitting posture was gone as he slumped like a puddle of mud. Is this my grandson? His Majesty's eyes were wide open. The eldest son's grandson? Your Majesty, please be careful with your words. Qiu Jianhan was shocked. This old official has been contemplating whether to tell your Majesty about this. I was afraid that your majesty would stir up too much of a commotion and cause chaos within Yutong. His majesty did not look like an emperor who ruled over the world at this moment. Instead, he looked more like an ordinary old man. An old man who had gradually given up on his son's safe return had unexpectedly learned that his son still had a descendant. A 2.5-year-old boy. He had a grandson now. He had thought that all his hopes had been dashed, but he did not expect God to still leave a little consolation for him. God has been kind to me. God has been kind to the Yu royalty. His Majesty sat there quietly, his face covered with tears. Where is the child now? His Majesty, who had been like a puppet, suddenly sprung up in a frenzy and grabbed Qiu Jianhan's robe. I don't know. Old Marshal Qiu was shocked. You don't know? You say you don't know? These 3 words ignited His Majesty's rage. The rage rose so abruptly that it could almost burn the entire palace. You came to tell me this news, but when you're here, you're telling me that you don't know where the child is now? His Majesty let out a choked roar, tears spilling from his eyes as the palace shook. Qiu Jianhan. You are committing the crime of deceiving the emperor. Chapter 382. Old Marshal Qiu broke out in cold sweat. I really don't know. Supreme Wind didn't tell me the child's exact whereabouts. He's worried about the child's safety. Actually, his concern, how could His Majesty listen to an explanation now? Like an enraged lion, he roared, preposterous. Ridiculous. What safety? What concern? What don't you know? This is the crime of deceiving the emperor. You should be exterminated and your entire clan confiscated. Qiu Jianhan. Hurry up and hand the person over to me. Otherwise, we will not only punish you for your crimes. I'll also exterminate your entire family. Do you think I dare or not? His Majesty had already gone mad. He was completely unreasonable. Looking at the emperor who was leaping 80 feet into the air and spitting spittle like a storm in front of him, Qiu Jianhan felt helpless and helpless. His heart was numb as well. I knew I would be scolded like this. His Majesty's reaction was more serious than he had imagined, much more so. It was obvious how much of an impact this matter had on him. I'm here to tell you that you have a grandson, that your grandson is still alive, but you actually want to punish me for deceiving the emperor. You actually want to exterminate my entire family. I was wondering if you dare or not. Why don't you say you should or shouldn't? Not only was the old marshal fuming, he was also aggrieved, very aggrieved. In spite of this, His Majesty was obviously agitated by the news. He was hopping mad and hysterical. Only God knew how much His Majesty had hoped for this news to come true. He had always thought that it was his own wishful thinking, a tiny hope in his heart. He had even thought that it would never happen. His son had put all his energy into the 9 Supremes. How could he have the chance to start a family, get married and have children? If he had a choice, how could he have given up his position as the eldest prince and crown prince? You can't have your cake and eat it too. There must be a choice. Choosing one would mean losing the other. He had not expected that his eldest son, who had become Supreme Earth, would marry Supreme Water, who was a woman, and have a son. The hope that he had given up on had actually come true. His eldest son. His Majesty felt like his blood was boiling. Exploding. Boiling. My son. His Majesty let out a cry of joy and sorrow. He felt that he owed a lot to his eldest son. Every night he would still think of him in his dreams. He still shed tears for him. But in the end, he still left behind a trace of his bloodline. It gave him a chance to make up for it. His Majesty's emotions were so complicated that he was almost heartbroken. Your Majesty. The old marshal was a little worried and comforted him. Please don't be impatient about this matter. We can't rush it. Since Supreme Wind has chosen to speak about this, he won't keep it back. He'll be exposed sooner or later. Why rush it? Besides, this isn't the right time. His Majesty was still unusually irritated. He walked back and forth without a care for his manners, like a lion trapped in an iron cage. Of course I understand your reasoning, but I really can't wait a moment longer. I want to see that child now. For His Majesty, this was an unbearable torture. He knew the news, but he couldn't see the person in person. That feeling was really like a kitten scratching at his heart. It was literally hundreds of claws scratching at his heart. Old bastard. Are you purposely tormenting me today? His Majesty glared at Qiu Jianhan in exasperation. Not only can I not see him, I don't even know where exactly he is. I don't even know when he'll be sent over to meet me. Are you going to let me wait like this? Do you think I'll be in a good mood? Qiu Jianhan sighed inwardly. How could he not know that this fellow was about to lose his temper and vent his anger on him? Your Majesty, even if you're the emperor and dictate everything, you should still be reasonable. I've thought of waiting for the person to come before telling you. The old marshal felt wronged and said, but this old official knows that your Majesty has been waiting for so long. Now that there's finally news, it would be terrible if it were to be kept a little longer. However, your current state not only disregards this old official's good intentions, it's also detrimental to the dragon's health. I hope that your Majesty can calm down and take your time to think about it. His Majesty said angrily, what a loyal and great official. It's your sincerity to tell me when you have news. However, you're telling me like this. How am I going to endure the coming days and nights of torment? Calm down and take my time to think about it? Your King lying. How can I calm down at a time like this? His Majesty had cursed. Damn. Qiu Jianhan felt dizzy. No matter what he did, it was wrong. Not only was he unreasonable, he had even cursed. It was wrong to give the emperor a heads up first, it was a crime of deceiving the emperor. Concealing the news and bringing the child to the emperor directly when he came was even more of a crime of deceiving the emperor. You should have laughed at me if you'd known this earlier. He didn't even use a groundless accusation. This was the true meaning of, if you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. If you really want me to calm down, bring the person to me quickly. This is the right thing to do. His Majesty growled again, but it was a low growl that was only aimed at the old marshal. It was obvious that His Majesty had gradually regained his clarity and knew that some words and matters could only be communicated between the emperor and his official. If a third person were to know about it, it would definitely cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. This old official is really helpless against your Majesty's request. Qiu Jianhan was already cursing Supreme Wind inwardly. Look at the trouble you've caused this old man. This old man is going to stay in the palace like this, unable to leave. His Majesty's wrath is a fear that even this old man is unwilling to bear. The old marshal heaved a deep sigh. It said that women are hard to appease, but that's because you fellows have never been an official. When you become an official, you'll know that there's a creature in this world that's even harder to appease than women. More temperamental than women. More unreasonable than women. This creature was called an emperor. When a woman turned against you, you would at most be upset. You would only need to spend some time, some money, and at most, some sincerity to redeem the situation. However, when an emperor turned against you, it was a matter of beheading. Even if your original intention was sincerity and consideration for him. After venting his frustrations, His Majesty could finally control his temper. He was sad one moment, happy the next, agitated the next, furious the next. Sigh. His Majesty finally heaved a long sigh. Old Marshal Qiu heaved a sigh of relief at once. It seemed that he had passed this hurdle. Otherwise, this fellow would not have sighed like this. The old marshal knew His Majesty very well indeed. His Majesty asked, "Did Supreme Wind say when to send the child here?" Qiu Jianhan answered, "Supreme Wind didn't specify a specific time. After all, he has to consider the child's safety. He can only confirm our attitude first, especially your Majesty's." As he spoke, His Majesty's anger that had just subsided flared up again. He slammed the table and roared, "Bastard! Since when is it his turn to judge my attitude? That's my blood." Before he could finish, old Marshal Qiu had already covered his mouth in anticipation and said anxiously, "Your Majesty, be careful with your words, be careful with your words. If you continue to act like this, not only Supreme Wind, even I don't agree to let you see the child." His Majesty struggled with all his might, but he dared not continue. He said furiously, "Old Qiu, how dare you treat me like this? Are you rebelling? Do you believe that I will punish you for deceiving the emperor and exterminate your entire family?" Qiu Jianhan rolled his eyes. He was doomed today. There was no way he could reason with this fellow today. Everything he said was wrong, everything he did was wrong. He could easily be accused of deceiving the emperor and was talking about exterminating his entire family. Could he still continue the drama of the emperor and his official? At that moment, old Marshal Qiu suddenly had the strange thought of, "I want to retire and return to my hometown." However, he dared not say it out loud. The old marshal guessed that if he were to really say these words today, he would not have to retire and return to his hometown in this lifetime. It was not a crime of deceiving the emperor either. His Majesty could swallow him alive if he was here. Still, this fellow was being too unreasonable. "I know that your emotions are unusual now and you want to see your long-awaited grandson very much, but you have to be a little more reasonable." Old Marshal Qiu really wanted to grab His Majesty's robe and ask, Why are you so unreasonable? Are you a woman? Why are you so unreasonable? Are you a woman? If it was possible, the old marshal wanted to roar and ask 100 times. 100 times. His Majesty paced back and forth in the royal study with an excited expression on his face. He walked faster and faster with his hands behind his back. In the eyes of the old marshal, he looked like a lion running back and forth with a tail dangling behind its buttocks. Old Qiu. His Majesty paced a few rounds and suddenly went to Qiu Jianhan, pressing both his hands on the latter's shoulders as he said in ecstasy, "I have a grandson. The person I've been waiting for the most is here. I have a grandson. I'm happy." Ah. Old Marshal Qiu was dumbfounded. "If I didn't know, I would have thought that you've discovered a new continent, but I was the one who told you about it just now. You can tell this to anyone but me. Besides, you wanted to exterminate my entire family just now for deceiving the emperor, and now you're being so intimate with old Qiu in the blink of an eye. You've changed too quickly. About this child?" Qiu Jianhan suddenly recalled something as he spoke. His Majesty did not seem to doubt the authenticity of this matter from the beginning to the end. He did not doubt the authenticity of this matter at all. He had just spoken and the emperor had accepted it immediately. It was a step further than simply believing it. What happened to the scheming of an emperor? What happened to not completely trusting anyone? Has your Majesty never doubted the authenticity of this? Qiu Jianhan asked in slight surprise. I don't, not even a little. His Majesty snorted and said in disdain, "Firstly, I believe in supreme wind. Secondly, I believe that my eldest son will definitely leave me a surprise. Thirdly, don't I still have you? I believe in you as well. If there was even the slightest doubt in this matter, you wouldn't have told me so quickly. Since you dared to say it, it proves that you have absolute confidence. We've been brothers for so many years, I still trust you completely. Old Qiu, we're good friends." His Majesty the Emperor said confidently. Qiu Jianhan was speechless. Chapter 383. His Majesty chuckled. "Therefore, I don't doubt the veracity of this matter at all. There's no doubt about it, no doubt about it." Qiu Jianhan sighed, feeling a surge of warmth in his heart. There was no one else who had such trust between an emperor and his official. A gentleman would die for his bosom friend. It was nothing more than that. However, about this child who has suddenly appeared, old Marshal Qiu had thought about this for 100 times before he finally mustered his courage to ask, "What do you plan to do, Your Majesty? You should know what you'll face once this child appears in front of the world, what he'll face and what the Empire of Yutong will face." His Majesty's expression slowly became solemn. He took 2 more steps before slowly walking to the chair and sitting down. His fingers gently tapped on the surface of the table, his brows tightly furrowed. Old Marshal Qiu's heart skipped a beat. He had to ask this question. He had to pry open the veil. What did His Majesty want to do? How could he go about it? Would his thoughts be the same as Supreme Wind's? The old marshal felt a sense of foreboding. "Old Qiu, what do you think of the Crown Prince?" His Majesty turned around and asked seriously. Old Marshal Qiu was petrified. "Why don't all of you ask the same question?" The old marshal's heart skipped a beat. If the final choice is the same for all of you, then it'll be interesting. He could answer this question directly when he was facing Supreme Wind and could not avoid responding to Supreme Wind's truth, but now that he was facing His Majesty, he had to answer this question in a different manner. "I don't know about Your Majesty's question." Old Marshal Qiu tossed the question back carefully, trying to control the expression on his face. "Why don't you tell me about the other princes other than the Crown Prince first? Are there any who are more promising?" His Majesty asked. Old Marshal Qiu's facial muscles twitched. He felt as if time and space had gone haywire. Supreme Wind had returned to sitting in front of him to ask questions. Perhaps he had returned to the moment when he had asked Supreme Wind the question? His Majesty obviously did not need his reply like Supreme Wind. He stood up with his arms behind his back and said in a low voice, "I know it's not convenient for you to reply. How could I not know that among all my princes, there's no one who can support Yutong? If I can only choose between them, I can say right now that Yutong will fall apart in an extremely short amount of time after my 100 years. Maybe this speed will be even faster, maybe a year and a half, or maybe 3 to 5 months. Among these sons of mine, it would be difficult to pick out a king who could preserve the legacy. As for those who are truly talented and overbearing, those who can conquer the world, they might have to reincarnate 3 to 5 more times before they have the chance to do it. However, the current world is not something that can be defended by a single emperor. In the Tianshan continent now, The heroes of the various empires are like packs of wolves. In such a specific environment, only by continuously attacking and annexing other countries can Yutong be at peace and secure for a long time. His Majesty's expression was solemn, his gaze deep. I can guarantee that in my lifetime the Emperor and his officials will get along well with each other, the generals and soldiers will serve with their lives, and Yutong will be safe and secure. I can also guarantee that under the premise of defending against the attacks from all sides, I can build a team that can conquer the world and be successful in conquering the world. However, I have a clearer understanding that before this team can be fully formed, I will most probably be gone. His Majesty extended a hand and stopped the old marshal's words of consolation. If my future successor is only a king who can preserve the legacy, not only will this team be useless to him, it will be harmful instead. If it's a fatuous emperor, this team will suffer even more. Whether it's the team devouring the fatuous emperor, or the fatuous emperor devouring the team, in the end, it's only himself who will destroy himself. There's no benefit to Yutong, no benefit at all. Old Marshal Chiu listened quietly, dumbfounded. The meaning behind his words was basically the same as what Supreme Wind had said. It was only the choice of words that differed. Perhaps, one of them was from the perspective of an outsider while the other was from his own point of view. However, if my successor, the next monarch of Yutong, is a monarch of great talent, wisdom, breadth of mind and grandeur, then he can use the team that I've built to advance further. He can walk out from the empire of Yutong, embark on the path of conquering the world and reign over Tianxian. His Majesty's gaze was glistening. Furthermore, within the 20 years of this monarch's reign, there's a great hope to unite the world and reign over Tianxian. To complete the foundation of Yutong's great cause. That's the greatest wish of the empire of Yutong's royal family, a wish that hasn't been fulfilled until now. But this wish of mine is something that these sons of mine who are standing here right now will never be able to achieve. If they were to inherit the throne, not only would this wish come to naught, even the Yu bloodline would be severed, let alone the empire's ambition. His Majesty looked straight at Qiu Jianhan. However, old Marshal Qiu dared not meet His Majesty's gaze, only turning his head away. My eldest prince is such a monarch. I was once the most ideal successor. There was pain in His Majesty's voice. It's a pity that the world is unpredictable, fate makes fools of us. He paused for a moment, raising his head and closing his eyes. After a long time he opened his eyes slowly. I feel a great deal of guilt towards my eldest son. I owe him. Qiu Jianhan felt his scalp tingle. It seemed that the choice was the same. The decision was the same. Since I owe my son, of course, I'll find a way to make it up to him. Everything that should belong to him, I'll pass it to his son, the only one who's qualified to inherit everything. His Majesty's voice was heavy, but his tone was resolute and unquestionable. For a moment, Qiu Jianhan felt his thoughts explode, floating in the starry sky. Vaguely, he could hear his own voice saying weakly, "But this child is only 2.5 years old?" His Majesty's voice was like a heavy hammer that seemed to come from the farthest place, but each word was clear. This age is good. This period of time can be used to compensate the eldest prince for what he has done. Secondly, it can be considered as my last effort for Yutong and the Yu bloodline. Although I don't have the time to groom a second successor, it won't be a problem to hold on for another 20 years. As long as he can grow into the successor that I hope for in these 20 years, everything will be worth it. That child's existence is a gift from heaven to me, to the Yu royalty, to Yutong and the world. It's another future, a bright future with no limit. God bless Yutong, God bless the Yu clan, God bless me, allowing me to have the chance to make up for my biggest regret. Qiu Jianhan realized that he had nothing to say now. The emperor of an empire had always been a loner. He was the only one who could make decisions. Once he had decided on something, he would not change it. He would not allow anyone else to comment on it, let alone interfere with it. Anyone who disobeyed would be touching the dragon's reverse scale. He would not rest until he was dead. After a long time, Qiu Jianhan murmured, "Your Majesty, this old official can understand your choice rationally, but emotionally, isn't it too cruel?" "It's too cruel," His Majesty said in a deep voice. "How could I not know that this choice and this method are too cruel to my princes? But this is the only choice that suits me the best. Moreover, this is the only choice that suits the best interests of the billions of people in this empire. Most importantly, this is the only choice that Empire of Yutong has hope, the hope that it won't perish." As he spoke, Qiu Jianhan could only sigh in silence. Just like what His Majesty had said, other than conforming to the people's interests and His Majesty's wishes, This was also the most hopeful and opportune choice. The most prominent feature was the 9 Supremes. The bloodline of the 9 Supremes represented too many bargaining chips. There was something that His Majesty did not say out loud, but old Marshal Chiu understood. If this child did not exist, nothing mattered. Supreme Wind, the only surviving member of the 9 Supremes, would still assist the Empire of Yutong with all his might. He would still help as always. Now, however, there was this child. Not only was this child of royal blood, he was also the son of the 2 Supremes. What choice would Supreme Wind make because of this connection was worth pondering. If the current Crown Prince or any of the other princes were to ascend to the throne, one could easily imagine what these people would do to the bloodline of the 9 Supremes based on their mentality. Then would Lord Supreme Wind tolerate such a superior, such a new Emperor of Yutong? That was completely impossible. Whether it was His Majesty or old Marshal Chiu, they had naturally come to the same conclusion after calculating it with their own hearts. Only by letting the child inherit the throne of Yutong could Yutong have a future. Otherwise, Yutong would perish even earlier. His Majesty had made up his mind. Even his mood seemed to relax as he said in a low voice, "Old Chiu, do you think that with our ability and foundation, the successor that you, I, and Supreme Wind have taught together, we are not qualified to be the future world's hegemon? Just thinking about this sense of accomplishment makes me indescribably excited." Chiu Jianhan smiled bitterly. The old marshal really did not understand where His Majesty's confidence came from. Could such a world's hegemon be taught so easily? Chapter 384. Looking at the princes in front of him now, including the Crown Prince and the heir to the throne, none of them were outstanding. The Crown Prince was the heir that Yu-Peiza had appointed. He must have at least been taught well. However, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he was a good-for-nothing. Otherwise, why would he be so frustrated right now? Why would he be so frustrated because there was no one who could carry the nation's weapon? Don't worry, old Chiu. His Majesty's emotions were completely stabilized. I only have this plan. I won't act rashly for now. At least, I won't make any drastic changes in the short term. Even if I've made up my mind and the plan is feasible, I'll still need to observe for a while more. This period of time will be at least a few years. Whether or not the child can bear the heavy responsibility, I can tell when he's 6 or 7 years old. If it's impossible, I won't be stubborn. His Majesty joked, "I'm not a fatuous ruler who knows nothing." Old Marshal Chiu nodded. This was the truth. If you were a fatuous ruler, your father would have stopped serving you long ago. You wouldn't have the chance to accuse me of deceiving you and your family. I'll pretend that I don't know about this and wait patiently. His Majesty said softly, "I'll wait patiently for the day my grandson comes to me. I must take a good look at how handsome my grandson is. Is he the same as his father? Smart, handsome, obedient, filial, wise, strong, wise, decisive, bold, and fearless?" His Majesty's gaze was filled with bitterness and tenderness. He slowly turned around and looked at the portrait of the great prince behind him. He mumbled, "Child father, I miss you so much that I can't sleep. If your heroic spirit is not in darkness, why don't you come to father's dream to meet me?" The eldest prince in the portrait was all smiles as he looked at his father from afar, full of kindness. Old Marshal Chiu felt a sudden pang in his heart, as if he could feel His Majesty's state of mind. At this moment the old marshal made a vow. If the eldest prince's son could be nurtured, he would entrust the rest of his old life to him. He wanted to see if he could really groom a hero who could dominate the profound sky continent. When Yun Yang returned to the Tower to Heaven Inn, he bumped into Lei Dongtian, who was clamoring to leave. Lei Dongtian had already recovered 30% of his ability. Bai Yishue, the only one who could stop him, did not have a good impression of Lei Dongtian and did not want to stop him at all. As for the others, they were powerless to stop him. After all, 30% of Lei Dongtian's ability was at the 3rd or 4th heaven of the heaven realm. Even a 10th perfection cultivator would not be his match. Fortunately, Yun Yang had returned amidst the chaos. "Brother, you are back at the right time." Lei Dongtian was overjoyed. "I have had enough of this. It is too uncomfortable to hide like a turtle every day. I plan to return to the family and gather my forces to annihilate the Four Seasons Tower to vent my anger." Yun Yang was stunned. "Brother Lei, it's not that I don't want you to leave now. It's just that it's too dangerous for you to leave now. It's impossible for the Four Seasons Tower to give up on you. If you go out now, it's like a lamb walking into a tiger's mouth. It's half fate and half luck that this young brother could save you previously. It's hard to replicate. If there's another mistake, it'll be too late for regrets." Yun Yang's words were sincere. Although he was not courteous, what he said was the truth. Lei Dongtian understood, but he still said confidently, "Don't worry, Brother Yun. With my disguise, it won't be easy for them to follow me. Besides, I have recovered part of my ability. As long as I don't meet the Four Seasons Tower's leader, Mr. Nian, the rest are mediocre. What's there to be afraid of?" Yun Yang was speechless. He thought to himself, "Big brother, where do you get such confidence from? The rest are mediocre and not to be afraid? Previously, you were beaten half to death by them, and even the only expert bodyguard was beaten to death. Yet you're still so confident, looking at people through the crack of the door. The education you've received since you were young, your arrogant personality is too strong. People don't turn back after hitting a wall, but not only do you not turn back, you continue to hit it. You've already hit your head until it's bleeding, yet you still don't stop. Do you want to die? Do you want to die? Do you want to die? Let's wait a little longer." Yun Yang said, "I believe that Brother Lei's cultivation method will recover to more than 60% in another 2 days. It won't be too late for Brother Lei to leave then. We can then be more at ease." Lei Dongtian sighed heavily. Although he was still reluctant, he could only accept it with his head hung low. After all, he knew that Yun Yang's intention was completely good and kind. Right, when Brother Lei returns this time, other than asking for help, this young brother still has something that needs Brother Lei's help. Yun Yang hesitated, looking embarrassed. "What is it?" Lei Dongtian found his sense of existence again. He patted his chest and said, "Brother, just say it. As long as it's something that I can do, I won't hesitate." Yun Yang scratched his head and said, This is really a little hard to talk about." Lei Dongtian said impatiently, "What's so hard to talk about? With the friendship between us brothers who have gone through life and death, anything you want is just a matter of a word. If I help you, I'll be helping myself. Just say it." Lei Dongtian's words were spoken from the bottom of his heart. He had already locked on Yun Yang as one of the cauldrons of the 7 emotions praxis. There must be true feelings between them. The most ideal situation would be for Lei Dongtian to show Yun Yang more kindness so that Yun Yang would naturally rely on Lei Dongtian and trust him wholeheartedly. However, the situation now was the opposite. It was Lei Dongtian who was greatly indebted to Yun Yang. If Lei Dongtian did not change his original intention and rashly activated the cultivation method to plot against Yun Yang, he would suffer the backlash of the cultivation method instead. After all, the 7 emotions praxis was a mystical cultivation method that relied on emotions. The biggest taboo was the betrayal of true feelings. Therefore, Lei Dongtian could not wait to help Yun Yang and gain as many benefits as he could. The more the better. It would be best to let this fellow shed tears of gratitude and bow down to repay Yun Yang's kindness. Yun Yang hesitated for a long time and said, "Brother Lei, this young brother doesn't want to." Lei Dongtian rolled his eyes and said, "Can you be faster? Do you have to be so wishy-washy? We're all brothers. There's nothing you can't tell your big brother." Resources. Agitated, Yun Yang blurted out, "Brother Lei, since the battle that day, this young brother has truly realized that the little strength I have is too weak. It's like an ant trying to shake a tree, insignificant. However, it is extremely difficult to improve one's ability quickly. Only a reclusive young brother like Brother Lei might have another way." Yun Yang's gaze was clear as he said respectfully, "This young brother knows that this is overstepping my authority, but my own ability is too weak. That's why I'm shamelessly asking for Brother Lei's help. I don't need anything too good. Anything that Brother Lei doesn't need but is more or less useful for cultivation, just give some to this young brother. I hope Brother Lei won't blame this young brother for being so rude." Lei Dongtian laughed heartily, "I was wondering what it was. Don't worry, leave everything you ask for to me." He pondered for a moment and said, "Those that I've given you previously are equivalent to 10 sets of cultivation resources in our family. When I come back this time, I'll bring you 100 sets of cultivation resources. How about that?" Yun Yang was shocked. "Too much. Too much. How can I use so much? How would this young brother dare to have such extravagant hopes? Too much? 200 sets then." Lei Dongtian waved his hand nonchalantly. "It's a deal then." The corners of Yun Yang's lips twitched subconsciously. What kind of existence was this fellow's Lei family? Look at how generous this fellow is. Also, this fellow's brain seems to be exceptionally strange. He said 100 sets and I said it was too much. Then he turned around and gave me 200 sets. What is he thinking? As the brains of the 9 Supremes, I can't even figure out how the Supreme Thinker came to be. Of course, Yun Yang did not know that Lei Dongtian was using this opportunity to settle the karmic ties he owed. The more he gave, the faster the karmic ties would disappear. Otherwise, Lei Dongtian was not an idiot. Cultivation resources were not things that would fall from the sky. How could he simply increase the price? Right? Other than cultivation resources, you don't want anything else? Lei Dongtian asked, how about 200 sets of high-level medicine? Yun Yang said hesitantly, how can I accept this? It's decided then, I'll call the shots. Lei Dongtian waved his hand, his aura soaring to the heavens. On the other side, Bai Yishua looked at the snow outside the window expressionlessly. He was so pretentious that he was afraid that he would burst out laughing if he could not control himself. This young master Lei. I wonder when he will understand the truth after being tricked. I've been tricked, but I'm a family with young master now. No matter what, I'll still benefit in the end. This fellow, on the other hand, is obviously going to be tricked until he dies. Rest well, brother Lei. If there's anything you need, just ask, don't be shy with me. Yun Yang left behind a big bag of fruits that were rarely seen in winter. These were, of course, the rations prepared for Gigi, but Yun Yang had bought 2 portions. The corners of Bai Yishua's lips twitched as he turned to see Lei Dongtian chewing happily with his mouth full of juices. This fellow must not know that his treatment was actually the same as his young master's bird. Perhaps, in my young master's heart, this fellow's position was really not as high as the bird named Gigi. Yun Yang was in a good mood. He had coveted Lei Dongtian's resources for a long time. They were all high-level goods that could not be found in this Tianxian continent. Since this fellow had agreed, he would definitely bring back a lot of good stuff the next time he came back. In this way, Yun Yang's demand for resources could be satisfied and there would even be a surplus. Yun Yang was rather satisfied. Lei Dongtian's resources were still far from being squeezed dry. The extraction was not complete, he had to work harder. Chapter 385. Yun Yang felt that his luck had been pretty good these few days. Not only had he found his boss flesh and blood, but he had also gained so many great cultivation resources. It would be a good choice to use some of these things on Bao to build his foundation. However, Yun Yang's good mood did not last for more than half a quarter of an hour before it was all gone. Shui Wuin's message had arrived. I found out about the news that boss wants to know. When Yun Yang saw the message, he was actually stunned. What news did I want to know? Why don't I have any impression of it? Finding Shui Wuin, he asked, what is it? Shui Wuin was taken aback as well. The news about the empire of Ziyou's assassin that you mentioned earlier? Didn't you ask me to find out about it? Yun Yang came to a sudden realization and said with a chuckle, yes. What's the exact situation? Shui Wuin said in a relaxed manner, this has nothing to do with us. It's just that it's caused quite a stir. Yun Yang asked with interest, just tell me the details. Why are you keeping me guessing? Not only was this assassin captured by the Empire of Ziyou's experts, he was severely injured and on the verge of death. The Empire of Ziyou wanted to punish him openly to warn the world and serve as a warning to others. But for some reason an important figure has interfered, and now we're in an extremely awkward situation. Yun Yang's interest was piqued as he asked, how awkward? Shui Wuin said, it's said that this assassin's injuries are too severe. Even with the help of treasured resources, he can only barely hang on to his life, maintaining a single breath of air. Yet, this important figure has spoken out at this critical juncture and is unrelenting. Yun Yang mused, what kind of important figure can have such a deterrent force? To be able to deter a great empire from acting recklessly? Shui Wuin spat out 3 words mysteriously, Jun Moyan? Yun Yang was stunned when he heard the name. Suddenly, a sense of foreboding welled up within him. He stood up abruptly, his expression turning frightening. Oh, who are you talking about? Jun Moyan, the unrivaled swordsman in the world. Shui Wuin was stunned as well, shocked by Yun Yang's expression. Boss, what's wrong? Why is your face so ugly all of a sudden? Yun Yang could only feel his heart pounding in his chest, almost leaping out of his throat. What is the name of this assassin? What did he look like? Why did Jun Moyan interfere? Do you have any specific information? I really don't know any more specific information. The Empire of Ziyou has sealed off all information related to this person. It's already a great deal of effort on our side to be able to obtain this information. More information will require more effort. Boss, you didn't ask me to pay too much attention to this matter previously, so the effort I've put in is naturally weaker. Shui Wuin frowned. He could sense that something was wrong. Yun Yang's expression and reaction were too unusual. In Shui Wuin's knowledge, Yun Yang had sufficient composure and shrewdness. He had always been the kind of person who would remain calm even if a mountain collapsed in front of him. When had he ever been in such a state of panic? But now, not only did his expression change, even his eyes were filled with unprecedented panic, as if something extremely terrifying and unexpected had happened. Could this assassin be related to Lord Supreme Cloud? Or perhaps, he was related to the 9 Supremes Lords? I don't know about other things, but you should know the assassin's approximate age, right? Yun Yang asked anxiously. I really don't know about this. It's my oversight. Yun Yang closed his eyes. Of course, he knew that it was not Shui Wuin's oversight. It was his previous order that had caused Shui Wuin to be careless and caused the relevant information to go out of control. If he did not even know the assassin's age, then there would not be any other relevant information. In spite of this, the ominous feeling that lingered in Yun Yang's heart grew stronger and more tangible. Why did Jun Moyan suddenly interfere? Why did this assassin only target the 4 Empire's higher-ups but not Yutong's people? Yun Yang touched the medallion of gratitude in his embrace and thought of old Dugu, the lonely old man. 7th brother's father. Another relative related to the 9 Supremes who was still alive. The more Yun Yang thought about it, the more flustered he became, his face draining of color. He had been trying to find out about this old man but he had never heard anything. Never would he have thought that the slightest bit of information that might be related to him would turn out to be a nightmare. The assassin was severely injured and on the brink of death, hanging on to his last breath with the help of the heaven and earth's precious resources. He could pass away at any time. If the assassin was old Dugu, if the old man were to perish, would it not mean that another relative had passed away in front of his eyes? Yun Yang was unwilling to accept such an outcome. He was even more unwilling to experience such a parting again. He stood up abruptly and said, Wuin, you will take over everything here in Tiantang City. Help me stabilize it no matter what. I have urgent matters to attend to, I have to go out immediately. Shui Wuin's premonition had become reality, scaring himself to death at once. Sir, don't act recklessly. Shui Wuin's expression changed. The Empire of Zio is thousands of miles away, it's an unfamiliar place with countless experts and it's the capital of an enemy nation. Not only will it be difficult for you to accomplish anything by going there alone, you'll also be in grave danger. Yun Yang waved his hand coldly, his face ashen. I've made up my mind. Say no more. Before his words echoed in the air, Yun Yang had already turned to leave. Brother Lei, something unexpected has happened. I can only apologize to Brother Lei first. Yun Yang came to Lei Dongtian's room with quick steps. If he were to leave and Lei Dongtian were to stay here, it would be terrible if something unexpected happened. Whether it was being killed or having some of his secrets discovered, Yun Yang was unwilling to do so. It was better to get rid of this fellow as soon as possible. What is it? Lei Dongtian was shocked. Judging others with his own eyes, he instinctively thought that Yun Yang was going to hand him over to the Four Seasons Tower. His eyes could not help showing unprecedented panic and fear. I have urgent matters to attend to personally. I have to leave Tiantang City immediately. It's destined that I won't be able to send you off when you leave, Yun Yang said apologetically. Oh, is that so? It's nothing at all. Lei Dongtian was relieved at once. Just do what you need to do. We are brothers, we have plenty of time. Thank you for your understanding, Brother Lei. It's an emergency. Yun Yang took a deep breath and said, this young brother has to go. His eyes were filled with endless rage and urgency. What's going on? You were still as calm as a mountain when you were threatened by the Four Seasons Tower. Why did you lose your composure this time? Lei Dongtian asked curiously. Brother Lei, you may not know this. Yun Yang sighed and said, the Four Seasons Tower is known as the top force in Tianshan continent, but its methods are unscrupulous and despicable. When it encounters an opponent it can't defeat, it will target the opponent's weakness. The unrivaled expert Ling Xiaozui of this world had gone up against it back then because the Four Seasons Tower had threatened him with the safety of his family and friends. Ling Xiaozui had no choice but to retreat. However, there are only a handful of people in this world who can be dealt with by the Four Seasons Tower other than by force. I didn't expect this young brother to enjoy such an honor. They were forced to make a pact with me, agreeing not to lay a hand on me in Tiantang City, but they've detained both of us somewhere else to lure me there. Lei Dongtian was shocked. There's such a thing? The Four Seasons Tower's methods are so unscrupulous. They don't have the magnanimity of an expert at all? Yin Yang sighed. I didn't expect the Four Seasons Tower to be so weak. This matter concerns the safety of my two family members. I have to rush over, but I'm also worried that after I leave the target of the pact will not be here. The Four Seasons Tower may very well take the opportunity to attack you. They're even deliberately luring me away. So, Brother Lei, it seems that you really need to leave earlier. If you delay any longer, I'm afraid that everything will go out of control. Lei Dongtian thought about it and felt chills running down his spine. Fear grew rapidly as he said, Yes, this must be a ploy to lure me away. He looked at Yun Yang like he was looking at a protective talisman. Brother Yun, are those too important? His meaning was obvious. Who could be more important than me? Why don't you stay and protect me? Yun Yang said seriously, It's my eldest senior brother and youngest junior sister. My youngest junior sister is my fiancée. Lei Dongtian was stunned for a moment. Eldest senior brother? Youngest junior sister? Fiancée? Recalling that he had come all the way here for his fiancée, the importance of a fiancée could be imagined. No matter how much Yun Yang valued him, he would rush over overnight no matter what. He could not replace his fiancée. This fiancée could shake my position in Yun Yang's heart. I can't let her stay. And that eldest senior brother, he must die as well. There can only be one person in Yun Yang's heart, no one else. Yun Yang's heart had gradually become Lei Dongtian's obsession. Lei Dongtian did not know about this, let alone Yun Yang. Since sister-in-law is in danger, we naturally have to save her. Brother Yun, you should immediately go and save her. After you leave, I will also immediately depart. I won't let you have any worries and be unable to take care of both ends. Lei Dongtian said decisively, not forgetting to state his stance. Since Yun Yang had left, as he said, the Four Seasons Tower had nothing to worry about. It was already extremely dangerous for him to be here. Of course, he had to leave immediately. That would be best. Yun Yang said, My guard is a first-class disguise expert. Old Bai. Bai Yishua stood up, Young Master, I am here. You are responsible for helping young Master Lei in his disguise. It must be perfect, including his skin color, neck, arms, wrists, hair, gaze, eyebrows, and so on. Even the distance between his eyes must be different from before. It must be flawless, without leaving a single flaw. Can you do it? Bai Yishua promised with a serious face, Don't worry, young master. I promise to complete the task. Nothing will go wrong. Remember, it must be foolproof. I won't allow any accidents. Yun Yang said seriously, After that, you must make sure that young Master Lei is safe with your own eyes. Otherwise you don't have to come back. The sudden blackout in the afternoon, I was so worried. At that time he had already written more than 3,000 words. He was happily writing and typing furiously. His computer had turned black. Unable to stop the inertia, I had actually hit the keyboard 7 to 8 times before I was dumbfounded, my manuscript. Then I was told that it could only be recharged after midnight or the next day. That kind of feeling was F***ket up. God knows how it feels to have to rewrite something that has already been written once. Anyway, I had a mental breakdown. Chapter 386. Don't worry, young master. This subordinate will do his best to ensure the completion of the mission. Bai Yishua said passionately, If young Master Lei is injured during this return journey, this subordinate will bring my head to see you. Don't bring your head. Brother Lei's safety is the most important thing. Do you understand? Yun Yang nodded and reminded him solemnly. Lei Dongtian was even more grateful. Of course, he could see that Lao Bai's ability was only at the 6th heaven realm. He usually did not pay much attention to him, but he was already the guard with the highest cultivation base on Yun Yang's side. This guard's cultivation base was nothing to him, but it was definitely not low. Even in his family he could be ranked in the middle. Such an expert would be at the pinnacle of the Tianshan continent, even higher than Venerable Lord Saber, one of the Four Seasons Tower's 5 venerable lords. He could be said to be Yun Yang's life-saving trump card. Yun Yang's journey would be dangerous, but for his sake, he had sent him to escort him without hesitation. This brotherly bond was simply moving. How could he not be moved? Brother, take care. Lei Dongtian turned around, feeling touched. He saw Yun Yang looking at him with a sincere gaze. Brother Lei, please take care. Lei Dongtian nodded heavily, tears welling up in his eyes. I'm leaving. Yun Yang turned to leave. Behind him, Lei Dongtian kept waving his hands, looking melancholic. He understood very well that if it was not because of him, how could Yun Yang's eldest senior brother and fiancée little junior sister be captured by the Four Seasons Tower? That was something that would never have happened. After all, he had implicated Yun Yang and put his family and friends in danger. However, this was still fate, the fate between him and Yun Yang. Yun Yang was a man destined to be his cultivation vessel. He had sacrificed for him and he was touched, but this was a fate bestowed by the heavens. If I did not take what the heavens gave me, I would be going against the heavens. The heavens were on my side. I am indeed the heavens' favored one, protected by the heavens, never to be covered in dust. Lao Mei and Fang Mafei, who were standing at the side, tried their best to cover their faces, using all their cultivation base to stop themselves from laughing out loud. Eldest senior brother? Little junior sister? What eldest senior brother and junior sister? Our young master doesn't even have a sect. However, this lie was really easy to tell and it was full of emotion which made people believe it without a doubt. Didn't they see that Lei Dongtian was so touched that he was about to open his heart and pour out his heart? Fang Mafei felt that the longer he followed Yun Yang, the more his composure deteriorated. Not only was the mask he had cultivated in the concourse of the underworld broken, even the last bit of composure was gone. He really did not know how to describe such an atmosphere. A gust of wind blew. The sky in Tiantang City that had been gloomy during this period of time suddenly became stormy. The sound of the wind grew louder, and the flags in the city fluttered in the wind. In the sky, the wind swept the white clouds, and the white clouds danced in the wind as they quickly went far away. His Majesty, who had been paying attention to the changes in the weather, walked out of the royal study hastily. Looking up, there was only one thought in his mind, that should be Supreme Wind's movement. Is he going to fetch my grandson? That's for sure. Let's hope this guy can move faster the better. His Majesty's heart was filled with anticipation. However, Qiu Jianhan, who was sitting in the marshal's residence, did not think so. Supreme Wind had said before that he would only come to listen to his news after 2 to 3 days. He would only fetch the child after hearing his news. This process would not change, he would definitely leave. This meant that Supreme Wind's departure was definitely not to fetch the child, but because he had other matters to attend to. It was not time yet. Looking at how he had created such a huge commotion, not even hesitating to expose Supreme Wind's cultivation method and expose his tracks to summon the wind and clouds to leave. He was definitely going to do something big, and his destination should be somewhere far away. However, Supreme Wind might not be able to return within the scheduled 2 to 3 days. Even how long it would take for him to return was something that could not be predicted. What the F***ck are you doing at this critical juncture? Don't you know that it's urgent here? Old Marshal Qiu leaped onto the roof and scolded without a care for his demeanor. You bastard, what are you doing? You've left such a huge mess to this old man and now you're leaving. How am I going to explain this to him? Do you know that the other side can't wait any longer? They're not the ruthless characters who can wait. Lives are at stake. The old man was really anxious now. He was sweating profusely, drenching his heavy robe. If you don't return by the appointed time, how am I going to explain to the impatient emperor? This time he was really going to lose his life. It was just a piece of news before and this old man had almost lost half of his soul. Now that you've left without returning, won't this old man be tortured to death by his majesty? Aren't you Supreme Earth's brother? Why can't you empathize with the urgency of a father who's anxious to see his son? What kind of important matter can't be dealt with after you've dealt with this father? Why are you in such a hurry? However, there was only the sound of the wind in the sky. How could Supreme Wind, who was burning with impatience, hear the old marshal's cries? His only thought now was to find another father who was willing to risk his life for his son. Yun Yang was unwilling to wait any longer, even if it was only a breath's worth of time. He could not wait any longer. The other side's life was at stake. He did not know if he could make it in time if he went over now. Yun Yang had been traveling at lightning speed. When he reappeared again it was already noon. In front of him was a huge river. This place was 3,700 miles away from Tiantang City. The river in front of him was vast, at least hundreds of miles wide. The Lunar River. It was said that this river was formed by the soul of the moon. Wherever the moonlight reached, this river would flow to. As long as the moon was still shining in the sky, this river would exist forever. It's been a long time since I've seen the Lunar River. As long as I follow the river, the empire of Zio will be on the other side. Yun Yang stood by the Lunar River, watching the river flow slowly as it flowed down 1,000 miles. He could not help feeling lost for a moment. How many times had the 9 brothers reunited by the river? How many times had they packed their luggage for the return trip here after the war? He could still remember the time when the eldest had stood on the rock he was standing on and said, "Legend has it that Tianshan continent doesn't only have the lunar river, there's also the solar river, the stellar sea, and the lake of wind and cloud. It's a pity that all we can see now is the lunar river. If the world is at peace in the future, I'll bring the brothers to see these legendary places." The brothers all cheered loudly and made an agreement that they would definitely go when the time came. Yunyang could vaguely remember that when the eldest Supreme Earth had said this, not only had his gaze been strange, his voice seemed different from usual as well. He did not know why he had such a strange feeling back then, but now he knew and understood. It was because the eldest Supreme Earth was the eldest prince. When the world was unified and Yutong's new emperor ascended the throne, if the eldest was still around, how would he feel? It was supposed to be the eldest's position, but he could only watch from the side. Therefore, he thought that instead of watching from the side and feeling uncomfortable, it would be better to bring the brothers to travel when the world was at peace, to leave this sad place where he had given everything away. Supreme Water had been standing beside Supreme Earth then and had said in a loud voice, "That's right. What's more important than being together with the brothers forever?" Thinking about it now, fourth sister had been consoling the eldest back then. It turned out that both of them had already fallen in love then and had even become husband and wife. Listening to Supreme Water's consolation, the eldest said again, "You're right. There's indeed nothing happier than being together with the brothers. Since we're already by the river, all forth, bring me to play in the water." After that, he pulled Supreme Water's hand and leaped into the bottomless lunar river amidst his guffaws. The brothers jeered and guffawed on the shore, mocking the eldest for his childish temper. Not only did he want to play, he even put it into action. It was a rare sight indeed. I only found out now. The eldest must have gone to the world of just the two of us with fourth sister then. Thinking of this, Yunyang could not help recalling the time when Supreme Earth had jumped with Supreme Water's struggle that he and the others had not noticed, and the brothers had even grumbled about the two of them being good gay friends for life. He could not help grinning and murmured, "Eldest, you're really something. You knew that the few of us knew nothing, so you treated us like fools and went to have fun openly. Seventh brother even said that good gay friends were good gay friends. Why didn't we have a part in it?" Many small details were heartwarming yet heart-wrenching when he thought about it now. He remembered how seventh brother Supreme Blood had grinned so heartlessly back then. Although they knew that face was fake, the brothers still wanted to beat him up as a group. His grin was too despicable. It's your business if you want to be good gay friends for life, why drag us into it? However, when Yunyang recalled that despicable grin now, he only felt nostalgic and bitter. "Seventh brother, our father might have been captured," Yunyang said quietly. Do you know? How can I allow such a thing to happen? Xiaojie will never allow any of our family to die, never." As Yunyang finished his words, he flew up and melted into the lunar river in an unusually smooth manner. Yes, he melted into the river. The empire of Zio and Yutong were naturally very different, especially when it came to natural phenomena like the wind. Chapter 387. The news that Supreme Wind was still alive was no longer a secret. Although Yunyang traveled swiftly with the wind and could reach the empire of Zio earlier, it was equivalent to exposing his tracks. It was a blatant declaration to the people of the empire of Zio that Supreme Wind of the Nine Supremes had come to the territory of Zio. If the enemy were to link this to Old Dugu, Yunyang would not be able to bear any accidents that might happen. Therefore, he would rather be slower in order to ensure that this trip was absolutely safe. At least, he had to be absolutely safe before confirming the situation and whether the target was Old Dugu. There was still Jun Moyen guarding the place anyway. There was still room for negotiation. Yunyang decided to use Supreme Water's holy water charm to hasten his journey. He leaped into the lunar river and cultivated the holy water charm along the way using the power of the river's water. He hastened his journey. However, it was only after Yunyang had jumped into the lunar river that he realized that cultivating the holy water charm to turn into water and turning into wind and cloud were two entirely different things. At the very least, the comfort he was feeling right now was incomparable to turning into wind and cloud. Yunyang, who was immersed in the water, felt like he was placed on a large, soft bed. He could control his deific consciousness and even his body, using the power of the water manifestation to expand them limitlessly. As long as the water could reach, his deific consciousness and thoughts could go there as well. Furthermore, it was a real collision of physical contact. Yunyang had never entered the lunar river before, but due to this fortuitous encounter, he understood one thing. The water of the lunar river was fundamentally different from the water of other places. This was a mystical river that stood out from the rest. The water of this river could be used for drinking and irrigation, but the quality of this river's water was much softer and much colder than the water of other places. The Lunar River flowed down from the borderless mountains in the extreme east, spanning 178,000 miles into the borderless sea on the other side. It had never stopped surging. Looking from the surface, the water was unusually murky and could not be used as drinking water. However, as Yun-yang immersed himself in the river, he realized that there was not even a speck of impurity or sand in the seemingly murky water. All the rocks, sand, and other things that were a hindrance to the water quality were lying quietly under the water. Even if the water occasionally rippled, it was rare that it did not drift with the current. It was a clear distinction in another sense. Other than that, Yun-yang had also noticed something odd. The entire lunar river stretched for 170,000 miles, but there was not a single stalk of seaweed in the water by the shore. This was yet another anomaly, one that went against the laws of nature. At the very least, Yun-yang could not understand how such a phenomenon could happen. As they traveled along the waterway, the scene of Yun-yang dancing with the fishes in the river did not happen as he had expected. It was not that the Kirin fish was magical, but that there were very few fishes in the lunar river. They were so few that they were almost negligible. Perhaps, this was the main reason why no one had ever been able to fish in the lunar river. In spite of this, the reason Yun-yang used the adjective almost negligible to describe the number of fish in the lunar river was because the lunar river was not actually devoid of fish. At the very least, Yun-yang had seen a fish now. It was a large fish that was as long as a human, glowing in a golden sheen. It swished its tail slowly in the water, looking extremely dazzling. Yun-yang was initially puzzled as to why no one had seen such an eye-catching fish before. When Yun-yang sent his deific consciousness away from the surface of the water and looked down at the river from above, he realized that he could not pinpoint the actual location of the giant fish even when he focused his deific consciousness. It turned out that the color of the fish was exactly the same as the color of the river when he looked down from above. It was almost impossible to detect its presence from above the water. This fish is not small. I wonder if it tastes good. Yun-yang thought to himself. After all, this fish belonged to the mutated species and was probably very rare. However, less than half a quarter of an hour later, Yun-yang realized that his perception was wrong. There was a large fish that had slid past him just now. It was a really big fish. Its nostrils alone were already bigger than his head. Yun-yang was shocked. What kind of fish was this? How could it be so powerful? However, what was even more amazing was to come. The new big fish walked forward in an elegant manner. As it walked, it constantly swallowed the river water. When it came to the fish that were as long as a human, it swallowed them without saying a word. There was no trace of anger in its actions, it was as if it could do whatever it wanted. Yun-yang sucked in a cold breath as he watched. Isn't this a little too savage? To carry out such a cruel act in such an elegant manner. Yun-yang felt that this fish was a cold-blooded animal. They were all fish, why would they be in such a hurry to swallow? After a while, Yun-yang realized something else, or rather, something that overturned his understanding. After seeing the large fish and the elegant and brutal giant fish, Yun-yang discovered a third type of strange fish. This third type had the same luster as the lunar river, but the smaller ones were as long as an arm while the bigger ones were like a giant python. What was strange about these fish was that they walked along the shore. Whether it was the budding aquatic plants or the small fishes and prawns at the bottom of the shore, they would all be swallowed without exception. The existence of this third type of fish was like a natural-born scavenger, specialized in cleaning up the miscellaneous items by the lunar river. It advanced all the way. When it was full, it would walk forward, wagging its tail. When it was hungry, it would walk and eat again. Behind them, there was an endless supply of these fish. They would stop after eating, walk and eat again when they were hungry, repeating the cycle. Yet, no matter how big these fish were, even if they were as big as a boat, they would not be discovered. This was because they were like melted objects in the water. They were the unique existence of the water itself. Delighted, Yun-yang tried to touch the bodies of the third type of fish and was shocked to find that his palms, which had returned to physical form, had passed through their bodies without any physical contact. What was even more unbelievable was that the fish that had been pierced through did not feel anything at all. Yun-yang exclaimed. If he had not turned into the lunar river, he probably would not have realized that there were actually so many mysterious giants in this clear river. The world is indeed vast and full of wonders. Creation is mysterious and miraculous, nothing is less than this. Yun-yang exclaimed again and again in his heart. Since the beginning of time, Many people had known that the lunar river was mysterious. However, there was not a single person who did not know where the mysteries of the lunar river lay. No one would have thought that the mysteries of the lunar river were actually laid bare in front of them. It was just that the people of the world had turned a blind eye to it. Until today, when Yunyang had accidentally discovered it. Yunyang was not sure that he was the first person to discover this secret. He might not even be the second. After all, there was another person who cultivated the holy water charm and had entered the lunar river before him. His fourth sister, Supreme Water. If his fourth sister knew this secret, then his eldest brother, Supreme Earth, should know it as well. The only regret was that even if he knew the secret, there was no room for him to use it. Just like what Yunyang had tried before, he could not catch the strange fish even when he had touched it with his own hands. What was the use of knowing this secret? Perhaps this was the main reason why his eldest brother and fourth sister knew of the peculiarity of the lunar river but did not tell their brothers. There are so many secrets hidden in the lunar river alone. Even though it has been presented to the world over the years, the people have turned a blind eye to it. What about the solar river? The stellar sea? The lake of wind and cloud? What will happen? Yunyang, who had his horizons broadened, could not help but consider the other strange places that were as famous as the lunar river. Since these places could be as famous as the lunar river, there must be many mysteries about them. Yunyang suddenly had the urge to go and take a look. At this point he finally understood the other meaning behind Supreme Earth's words back then. Other than his feelings, he did indeed have the desire to see the mysterious places of this world. In the future, I will visit all of these mysterious places, Yunyang said quietly, with our common wish. As time passed, Yunyang grew more and more interested in the lunar river. He realized that the water of the lunar river was extremely soft and cold, but there was also a strange quality to it. If it was diverted into another channel, it would become no different from an ordinary water source. There was nothing different about it. The lunar river's water was pure and clean. Once it was diverted, there would not be a single shrimp in it. All living things within the lunar river's boundary seemed to only be able to stay in the lunar river, only belonging to it. No water source other than the lunar river could be tolerated. The water around him suddenly surged slightly. Then Yunyang discovered a huge fish, the biggest fish he had ever seen since he was born. The fish was at least 370 to 80 feet long and 200 feet wide. It swam over leisurely. Actually, Yunyang had encountered gigantic fish before, but even when he met them or even came into direct contact with them, it was as if he did not see them or touch them. The difference between the two was clear as they moved. Therefore, even though Yunyang was shocked to see the gigantic fish, he did not pay it much attention. However, there was an unexpected turn of events that Yunyang did not expect this time. Yunyang was shocked to realize that the water he had turned into had been sucked into the gigantic fish's mouth and stomach. Then with a swoosh he was spat out again. It's huge. *CK. How unlucky. Yunyang exclaimed and cursed with a dark expression. Yunyang quickly understood what was going on, but it was precisely because he knew what was going on that he was cursing his bad luck. A certain someone had been swallowed by the gigantic fish from the front and then spat out from the back. In fact, the entire process was unusually smooth. The gigantic fish did not even realize what it had swallowed or spat out. Chapter 388. However, Yunyang, who was the other party involved, was exceptionally frustrated. Anyone would be frustrated by this, it was understandable. However, no matter how frustrated he was, there was nothing he could do about the fish. After all, Yunyang had tried repeatedly, but no matter what method he used, he could not really touch the fish. Otherwise, he would have done something else long ago. He could only watch helplessly as the gigantic fish that had swallowed and spat him left. It was at this moment that something happened again. The gigantic fish suddenly stopped and began to wander on the spot, shaking its head and tail as if it was looking for something. His two large eyes were as big as a house, and they were wide open, looking around for something. There was no other reason other than the fact that it seemed to have eaten something amazing just now. Although it had only passed through his stomach once, it had already caused him to suddenly feel refreshed and comfortable. Even his body had grown a little at that moment. It was unbelievable. How could it let go of such a good thing? Therefore the gigantic fish stopped and did not leave. Finding something good, searching for something good, occupying something good, everything was logical and logical. However, after searching for a while, he did not find anything. The giant fish was disappointed, but an idea came to his mind. How did he get that good thing? Wasn't it just swallowing the river water? He could just do it like a bowl. Thus, he continued searching and swallowing the river water. Gradually, he turned the lunar river into a huge whirlpool. However, the surface of the water was as smooth as a mirror. Of course, Yun-yang would not make the same mistake again. He followed right under the big fellow's fins. No matter how it searched or swallowed, as long as it could not swallow its own fins, he would not be able to enter its stomach. Yun-yang was puzzled as well. This fellow obviously did not notice him just now. After cultivating the holy water charm, I have become a water manifestation, tangible but formless. Even I can't find myself. How did this fellow notice it? Yun-yang had obviously neglected one thing, a very important thing. The treasured resources that Yun Zuyu had fed him had long turned Yun-yang into a human-shaped treasure, like a spiritual medicine. Even when his physical body turned into water, the medicinal effect would not vanish. It would still be excreted through his sweat pores. It was a process of metabolism. And just now, that supergiant fish had taken advantage of that bit of light and tasted the sweetness. That was why it enjoyed the taste so much that it forgot to go home. With the current situation, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to escape. Since I can't escape, then I might as well seize this opportunity to study this fish? Yun-yang channeled the holy water charm subtly to ensure that he remained in the state of flowing water. He swam back and forth on the fish's body, studying it in detail. Although this fish caused a huge commotion, I didn't sense any danger from it. Its lethality is flashy but impractical, not worth mentioning. I wonder if this fish tastes good? It's a pity that the fish in this river can be seen but not touched, let alone caught. What a pity. Yun-yang suddenly had a thought. Right, since this fish is so huge, could it have an inner core? With this thought, Yun-yang had the urge to enter the creature's stomach again to take a look. Do whatever you want. This time, Yun-yang dove into the creature's mouth on his own accord. The creature was sucking in with its mouth wide open, hoping to swallow something good again. However, before the new round of sucking could begin, it suddenly felt a stream of water gushing into its mouth and into its stomach. The big guy immediately opened his mouth, which could almost swallow a city gate, and was instantly stunned. What was going on? What was going on? Leaving aside the creature's confusion, Yun-yang had already entered the fish's stomach successfully. The lunar river fish that could not be touched in its physical form could be touched in its water form. Yun-yang carefully cultivated the holy water charm, searching for it along the way. Under his careful control, he did not have to worry about being spat out by the supergiant fish's instinctive reaction. But in this way, this big guy would be able to bask in more light, and it would only get more and more. The creature still did not understand what was going on, but it knew that something beneficial to it had been swallowed by it and that it would be safe in its stomach for a long time. Out of instinct and fear of its own kind snatching it away, it quickly curbed its movements and charged forward with all its might. It brought Yun-yang along as it sprinted forward. In terms of speed, however, it was more than 10 times faster than Yun-yang's first stage of holy water charm. However, this big guy would never have thought that the little guy in its stomach was up to no good at all. Yun-yang, who was swimming leisurely in the fish's stomach, suddenly felt a flash of light in front of him. Yun-yang, who was swimming leisurely in the fish's stomach, suddenly felt a flash of light in front of him. Naturally, he followed the light and continued to move forward slowly until he came to the light and took a closer look. Even with Yun-yang's composure, he could not help but exclaim in surprise. My goodness! Hanging in front of him was a bunch of gigantic grapes? It should be said that it was like a grape, but it was much bigger than a grape. There were about 40 to 50 grapes in front of him. Each of them was round and colorless, crystal clear. Judging by their size, each of them was about the size of a watermelon, exuding an endless amount of spiritual chi that was extremely rich. While the unique spiritual chi in front of him made Yun-yang feel comfortable, it also gave him a strange feeling. I've never seen it before, but it feels very familiar. A strange feeling. It was only when Yun-yang saw the gleam of cold light that he finally understood, a thought emerging in his mind. This is the chi of moonlight. Yun-yang tried to form the water into the shape of a hand, grabbing one with both hands and pulling it down forcefully. With a soft tearing sound, Yun-yang had actually plucked one of them off. The gigantic fish that was strolling forward leisurely did not seem to notice anything amiss. It did not seem to feel any pain at all. Could it not feel any pain? Yun-yang, who had already split a part of his deific consciousness to observe the gigantic fish, was stunned. He was even prepared for the fish to react violently and turn the world upside down, but the fish did not react at all and was still doing what it was supposed to do. Was this not strange? However, what happened next made Yun-yang even more confused and bewildered. This was because Yun Yang had seen with his own eyes that the watermelon grape beads that he had been holding in his hands, materialized from his water manifestation, had shattered without a sound. Then the aura had dissipated, never to be seen again. Yun Yang's hands were empty. Then a new watermelon grape grew in the spot where he had plucked one of the grapes off the bunch. Yun Yang was speechless. It couldn't be that strange, could it? I've just entered the lunar river and it's already giving me such a huge surprise? Yun Yang tried more than a dozen times, but it was all in vain, a waste of effort. There was a rich spiritual energy right in front of him, but he could not absorb it. It was easy to pluck the watermelon grapes, but they would go back on their own. Yun Yang's repeated attempts were futile, driving him mad. The current situation was like looking at a treasure mountain that was 3 feet in front of him. As long as he could pluck a piece of it, he would not have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of his life. However, when he finally managed to pluck a piece off, it would go back on itself before he could take it away. The moment of possession was not equivalent to possessing it. He had actually experienced the truth of this saying. How King frustrating. The current situation made Yun Yang feel conflicted. He could clearly feel that this was a strange power and it definitely had a great use. However, the problem now was that he could not take it away no matter how hard he tried. He could see it, he could even touch it, but he just could not get it in his hands. This was not just a dilemma, it was a frustration. Yun Yang had never seen such a strange fish before, much less such a strange water. There was also such a mystical and mysterious energy. There were many mysterious energies in the legends of the world, each with unique powers. However, the one that Yun Yang had encountered today was not even mentioned in the legends. It was enough to show how mystical it was. The Lunar River, one of the 4 mysterious waters of the Tianshan continent, had finally unveiled a mysterious veil in front of Yun Yang today. However, he did not know if this veil was the innermost layer, the middle layer, or perhaps it was just the outermost layer of the veil. Yun Yang's attempts were futile. Finally, he felt that he was at his wit's end, but he was indignant. The treasure mountain was right in front of him, but he had to return empty-handed? However, just as his thoughts wavered, he was spat out once more. What bad luck! Yun Yang sighed. The first time he was spat out, it was sudden and he could not do anything about it. This time he had brought it upon himself. However, with the opportunity before him, Yun Yang was indignant. He turned into a stream of water and entered once more. This time, however, Yun Yang changed his host body slightly. Once he entered, he changed his cultivation method immediately, turning from a stream of water to a drop of blood. This was also the magical effect of the holy water charm. As long as the cultivator's cultivation was successful and his skill was sufficient, he could transform any liquid substance in this world. Of course, Yun Yang's current skill was still shallow. He could only transform something like blood, mercury, gold liquid, molten lava, and so on. He was still far from being able to do so. However, once he turned into a drop of blood, he could stay in the giant fish's stomach for a long time. After all, to the giant fish, Yun Yang was already a part of its body and could not be separated easily. Since there was no longer the threat of being spat out, Yun Yang continued to get the bunch of grapes. Chapter 389. Yun Yang was certain at once that this was a treasure, a superb treasure. It was a pity that Yun Yang had worked hard for a whole day, but there was nothing to show for it, not to mention any benefits. It was midnight. Yun Yang stood by the shore helplessly, looking at the lunar river and could not help but sigh. This is obviously a massive treasure that's right in front of everyone's eyes. The struggle in Yun Yang's heart grew exponentially. The feeling of entering a treasure trove and returning empty-handed was like a weed growing in Yun Yang's heart that could not be erased. So what if it was? There was really nothing he could do. Yun Yang had used all his tricks throughout the day. Water attribute, no. Thunder attribute, no. Blood attribute, fire attribute, no. Wind and cloud attribute, no. Unique cultivation methods were all useless. Yun Yang had even tried to use the purest mystical chi to fuse with the grape's mystical chi, but it still did not work. Yun Yang had tried using brute force to grind it, even biting it with his mouth, using his sword, saber, and even storing it in his spatial ring, but it was all futile. After confirming that he was helpless, Yun Yang had asked the Eclipse Panther to absorb it and Gigi to absorb it. If his pet beast could benefit from it, it would be the next best option, but it still did not work. In the end, Yun Yang had no choice but to use Emi's ultimate trick. To Yun Yang, Emi was the nemesis of all kinds of energy in this world. Everything in the past had proven this point. Although it was a bit of a waste for Emi to absorb it, it was still better for one of them to gain something than to miss it. However, Yunyang was filled with confidence as he waited for Emmy's good news and the leftover benefits that had leaked out, only to receive an extremely depressing answer. This is a power that doesn't belong to this world. The fishes in front of me aren't of this world either. They can't be absorbed or targeted. Yunyang was dumbfounded by Emmy's answer. Doesn't belong to this world? This answer explained why Emmy could not absorb it. However, how was this an answer? Doesn't belong to this world, but why am I seeing it here? Is this not this world? When Yunyang wanted to ask again, he realized that Emmy had stopped talking. He did not know that Emmy was feeling frustrated. Good stuff, really good stuff, but I can only look at it, but I can't eat it. What is this? Were all the things in this world so varied? Could it be a fake? After a whole day of trying, Yunyang finally decided to give up. If he didn't give up, what else could he do? He had important matters to attend to, and he shouldn't stay here for even a day. Moreover, he had already used all the methods he could, and there was nothing he could do. Even so, Yunyang's heart was still broken and defeated. After all, ever since Yunyang had gone through the calamity of the 9 Supremes, his journey had been smooth sailing. Today, however, he had to return in defeat in front of a river and a school of fish. How could he be depressed, conflicted, defeated, and broken down? In the time that followed, he cultivated the holy water incantation as he traveled. However, as it was difficult for him to concentrate, the results of his cultivation were the worst he had ever achieved. After 2 whole days, he had only managed to cultivate to the middle of the 2nd level of the holy water incantation with the help of the lunar river, which was a holy land for water cultivation. Of course, if it had been someone else, the progress would not have been considered slow. Not only was it not slow, it could be said that it was shockingly fast. However, compared to Yunyang, who had so many mystical aids, it was very slow. With Yunyang's temperament and cultivation base, he should not have been so dispirited after a single setback. It was because he had encountered many of those huge fishes during the next 2 days of travel. One of them was even bigger than the previous one by a few times. If the previous one was already a supergiant fish, then this one was at least a supergiant fish. The core of this superfish was also a bunch of super big grapes, the biggest one among them reaching the size of 3 watermelons. However, Yunyang felt that his holy water incantation cultivation base had improved again, or perhaps it was because he was unwilling to give up. He tried to dive in and absorb it again, but it was still to no avail. As such, Yunyang's frustration grew to a whole new level. He even felt that his depression had risen to a level that no one had ever experienced before. From beginning to end, Yunyang had encountered hundreds of these huge fishes with the energy cores in their stomachs. Yunyang believed that what he had encountered and seen was far from all of them. It was only what he had seen along the way. This stretch of water was only a little more than 10,000 miles, while the entire lunar river was 178,000 miles long. Each time he thought about the fishes he had encountered, as long as he had eaten any one of the grape cores in their bodies, his ability would have improved tremendously and his power would have increased tremendously. If he had eaten the core of the biggest fish, even just one of it would have been enough to make him invincible in the world. He had encountered tens of thousands of treasures in total, but not only could he see them, touch them, and even capture them in his hands. Yet, he could not truly keep them for his own use. If it had been anyone else, they would have been frustrated, dispirited, or even broken down. Yunyang felt that he could be considered a genius for being able to cultivate to the 2nd stage of holy water charm under such a state of mind. He felt good about himself, so good that he could not be better. He actually wanted to cry out loud, to express the sorrow of entering a treasure trove and returning empty-handed. Even though the great joys and sorrows of life had come so suddenly, so inexplicably, this is still the lunar river that the world knows of. Other than that, there are the more mysterious solar river, stellar sea, and lake of wind and cloud. I wonder what they look like. One day I'll find out what's going on and what the other 3 lands of holy water look like. I'll bring my brother's wishes and see them one by one. The last time Yunyang had said this, he had only wanted to look at the scenery. This time, however, Yunyang had made up his mind. The mystery within, I must be clear. I must find out. What a massive treasure. While Yunyang's attempts to obtain the energy of the exotic fishes were futile and frustrating, there was also a good thing. Yunyang was now within the empire of Zio's territory. Indeed, Yunyang had arrived at Zio's territory within these 2 days. There was a reason why he could arrive at his destination so swiftly. With Yunyang's holy water charm cultivation base, his movement speed as a unit of water movement was far slower than that of wind or cloud. However, when Yunyang had tried to obtain the exotic energy from the giant fishes, He would always look for them that were heading towards the empire of Zio. Yun Yang, who was residing in the belly of the giant fishes, was also gradually approaching the empire of Zio. Furthermore, the speed of the giant fishes was not only far faster than Yun Yang's water movement, it was no slower than Yun Yang's full speed in his wind manifestation. I've entered the empire of Zio's territory. In other words, I'm now less than 7,000 miles away from the empire of Zio's capital, Zilong City. Yun Yang confirmed the terrain beneath him and calculated, there's still less than 7,000 miles. Honestly, if he had a choice, Yun Yang really did not want to come out of the water and step onto land. There were so many giant fishes and so many cores. A great opportunity was right before his eyes. It was because of the holy water charm that he had encountered such mystical energy. It was obviously his opportunity, but why did he not get any of it in the end? Thinking about it, Yun Yang felt like he was about to break down again. Forget it. Since the beginning of time, no one has ever discovered the secret of the lunar river, let alone the fact that there are fishes in it. There aren't even any legends related to it. It won't be discovered in these few days. This opportunity is a secret that I've obtained alone. I should focus on what's in front of me. When the trip to Zio is over, I'll think about the follow-up to this matter. Yun Yang pondered for a moment and no longer hesitated. He turned into a breeze and advanced in the air. He really did not want to be agitated like this now. It was already too many times for him to go through it again and again. I'll come back in the future anyway. Yun Yang traveled leisurely in the air. After about 700 to 800 miles, he suddenly realized that there was a 3-story ship with bulging sails on the surface of the lunar river not far in front of him. It was moving swiftly on the surface of the water as if it was flying. Not only was the ship moving at an unusually fast speed, it was also more than 100 times larger than ordinary ships that traveled on the surface of the water. It was 1,000 feet wide and 3,000 feet long. Just the pitch-black hundreds of feet long horn at the bow of the ship was like a monster galloping on the surface of the water. It was a pity that Yun Yang did not care about the gigantic ship at all. Yun Yang had seen too many big fellows in the past 2 days, so he did not feel that the ship was huge at all. Was it huge? It was not even as big as a fish, yet it was called big. More importantly, Yun Yang knew this ship and knew its background and history. Putting a certain someone's new horizons aside, this gigantic 3-story ship was rare even in the entire world. It could even be considered the world's largest ship. The reason for this recognition was that this ship originally belonged to the Empire of Yutong. Back then, Yutong's founding emperor had spent 20 years and the entire nation's resources to build 3 gigantic ships of the same type and model. As for the materials used to build these 3 gigantic ships, even the most inconspicuous piece of wood was the star hemlock, which was said to be indestructible for tens of thousands of years. It could be said that even if such a ship were to be left idle for hundreds or thousands of years, it would still be as bright as new, its splendor undiminished. Chapter 390. As long as the 3-headed dragon was captured and swallowed together with the yin-yang snake core that the late emperor already had, he would immediately be able to create a myth-level expert. He could even give birth to an eternal emperor who would live forever. To Yutong's founding ancestor, the lineup he sent out was enough to shake any powerful mystical beast in this world. Even the legendary 3-headed flood dragon, a Tianxian pinnacle mystical beast, could be captured easily. The day he ruled over Tianxian forever was just around the corner. Unfortunately, the reality was that 2 of the 3 ships had sunk less than half a month after setting out to sea. The 3rd ship would have perished if it hadn't been for the fact that it saw the opportunity in time and ran back with all its might. Along the way it was attacked by powerful sea beasts. Even after the ships docked, the attacks from the sea beasts did not stop. The dock that was docked was destroyed in an instant. It was also that battle that wiped out the Empire of Yutong's elite naval forces in one fell swoop, completely crushing the late emperor's ambition. Judging from Yutong's national power back then, the Empire of Yutong would have conquered the world a long time ago if it had not been for that voyage. Perhaps it was destined that there would never be an eternal emperor in this world. All in all, that voyage had become the dividing line between the Empire of Yutong's prosperity and decline. The ship that had escaped with great difficulty was placed at the Lunar River's dock that flowed through Yutong and had not been used for many years. As the 9 Supremes think tank, Yun Yang, who was in charge of the war and had calculated all of his forces, knew that Yutong had such a ship, but he had never seen it before. He had never thought that he would see this supreme fortress ship that symbolized Yutong's most glorious period on the Lunar River, in the Empire of Zio. Yun Yang's gaze focused on the ship. All he could see were warriors in black helmets and armor, each of them looking valiant. However, each of them had a white band tied around their arms. Many of the generals had white bands tied around their foreheads as well. Yun Yang was puzzled. What was the purpose of this ship? Who had brought it here? He furrowed his brows and waved his hand. Then, a sudden gust of wind blew past. The ship, which was originally traveling at a high speed with the wind and the current, suddenly encountered a headwind. The surface of the Lunar Soul River also became turbulent. Waves of tens of feet high rose one after another, hitting the Supreme Ship again and again. Even though the Supreme Ship was huge, it still couldn't help but shake in the face of such strong winds and waves. What happened? A general jumped out and asked sternly. However, there was no one who could answer this question. Everyone was shocked by this sudden turn of events, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Right at this moment, one of the curtains on the three-story ship was suddenly lifted, and a tall figure walked out with large strides. Yun Yang, who was looking down from the sky, could not help but stare blankly at the silhouette on the other side, almost falling from the sky. What's going on? Why was this person here? The person who came out was tall and walked with a majestic gait. Although he was slightly skinny, he naturally had the air of a great general as he stood there. The newcomer wore a purplish-black armor, a phoenix helmet on his head, and a treasured sword hung from his waist. One of his hands seemed to be placed on the sword's hilt casually, but in fact he was ready to react in time to any unexpected danger. This person was looking into the distance from the top of the three-story ship, a lock of hair that spilled out from the helmet fluttering in the wind. It was Shengguan Lingxiu. Yun Yang's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Why was she here? He remembered that when the Four Seasons Tower attacked the residence of Yun, he had caught a glimpse of Shengguan Lingxiu leading troops to help. She seemed to be dressed like this then. However, she did not come to greet him then. Instead, she had left directly after making sure that he was safe. Now that she had suddenly appeared here, Yun Yang was extremely puzzled by the turn of events. According to the time, it should be, after making sure that he was safe, she had gone to the port immediately and left in a hurry. That was how she could possibly appear here now. However, what was Shengguan Lingxiu doing here? This was the Shengguan family of generals' biggest enemy, within the territory of the Empire of Ziyou. General Wudi's tragedy and vow all those years ago were still ringing in his ears, heart-wrenching. No matter what, the Shengguan family should not have appeared here. Yet Shengguan Lingxiu had appeared here. Following Yun Yang's inaction, the wind and waves on the river's surface calmed down and the surrounding environment calmed down swiftly. The ship continued to move forward. What happened just now? Shengguan Lingxiu asked calmly. I don't know. The burly general was still watching the surroundings cautiously. There was a sudden, strange wind that caused the river's condition to change, but it's gone now. Shengguan Lingxiu frowned and murmured, Strange wind? Could it be? How could it be? It can't be. She looked around but did not notice anything out of the ordinary. With a frown, she returned to the cabin. However, just as she entered her private cabin, she almost cried out in surprise. In front of her, a green silhouette stood quietly, as if he had been there for a long time, waiting for her to return. Lady Shengguan? The green silhouette said faintly, Please take a seat. The other party did not budge, but a gust of wind blew as a chair at the corner of the cabin floated soundlessly into the air and floated in front of Shengguan Lingxiu. It landed steadily, not making a single sound throughout the entire process. It's Lord Supreme Wind? Shengguan Lingxiu said in pleasant surprise, I wonder if Lord Supreme Wind has appeared suddenly? Yun Yang was taken aback. You don't doubt the authenticity of my identity? Shengguan Lingxiu smiled sweetly. The daughter of a family of generals can naturally recognize Lord Supreme Wind's accent. While Yun Yang was relieved, he asked seriously, Why is the Shengguan family of generals here? What's the matter? Yun Yang was extremely puzzled about the purpose of Shengguan Lingxiu's visit. That was why he had appeared as Supreme Wind to ask her face to face. Shengguan Lingxiu understood the origin of the strange wind at once. Lord Supreme Wind must have passed by this place coincidentally due to some errands and accidentally saw the ship, recognizing its origins. Hence, he had come down to question it. If it was an enemy, he could just overturn it and feed it to the fishes. If there was any secret operation by Yutong's official military, there was no need to hide it from Supreme Wind. Shengguan Lingxiu understood immediately and said, The incident this time is because of Granduncle Wudi's matter. The Shengguan family is required to come over. This humble girl has come because of this matter. Supreme Wind's voice was much more serious and respectful. It's related to General Shangguan Wudi? Shangguan Lingxiu lowered her head. Yes. Is Lady Lingxiu here to bring the corpses of General Wudi and his wife back to the Shangguan family? Yunyang sucked in a deep breath. If this was the case, he had to lend a helping hand. No. But it's related to this as well. Shangguan Lingxiu hesitated for a bit before she explained in detail. The reason for this operation is because the old mistress at home hasn't been feeling well in recent years. That's why she asked me to come and bring Granduncle Wudi's memorial tablet back. There have been some incidents in the Empire of Zio as well. I was thinking that perhaps I could invite Granduncle and the rest back earlier. At this point, she sighed faintly. What are the specific incidents? Yunyang asked, what has happened in the Empire of Zio? Shangguan Lingxiu gritted her teeth, a murderous glint in her eyes. Someone here has suddenly suggested to destroy Granduncle's remains. There are a few people in the Zio royal family who have the same intention. Only the Empire of Zio's emperor himself has objections and doesn't agree with it. After some negotiation we came over. Shangguan Lingxiu's description of the incidents was vague. Yunyang was confused, but he could still understand the general situation. The Empire of Zio wanted to destroy the Shangguan family of generals' ancestors' remains, and the Emperor of Zio had used this as a bargaining chip to force the Shangguan family of generals to compromise. The so-called negotiation was just an excuse. This was evident from the worry in Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes. Even though she had said it lightly and there was the buffer of negotiation between the two empires, the Shangguan family could not wait any longer. The Shangguan family of generals was at a complete disadvantage in the current situation. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, no matter how much the other party demanded. What was more, if the Empire of Zio really destroyed the ancestors' remains, it would be the family's greatest regret. There would be no way to make up for it. Therefore, Shangguan Lingxiu had set off earlier. When the emperor heard about this, not only had he sent 10,000 troops to assist, he had even allocated this supreme warship to increase Shangguan Lingxiu's speed. If General Wudi can return, of course, we must welcome him back with the world's most invincible warship. These were His Majesty's exact words. Only then can he be worthy of Shangguan Wudi's hero. A hero in life and a hero in death. Where is Lord Supreme Wind heading to this time? Anticipation flashed in Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes. If they could receive Lord Supreme Wind's assistance this time, it would be an unexpectedly strong aid and they would definitely benefit greatly. Meh. Yunyang thought about it and said, I have something to do on this trip, but perhaps we can meet again in Zilong City? Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes shone brightly when she got the confirmation. Yes, this humble girl will keep my mouth shut. I will never reveal Lord Supreme Wind's whereabouts. Shangguan Lingxiu had never let her name down. She was exceptionally intelligent and had thought of keeping it a secret at once. Supreme Wind leaving the country was a major event. As the only surviving member of the 9 Supremes, his importance was even above that of Yutong's emperor, Yu Peiza. If the Empire of Zio knew about it, they would definitely think of ways to deal with Supreme Wind. To Zio and the other 3 empires, even if they had to sacrifice their capital, it would be worth it as long as Supreme Wind could be killed. Chapter 391. Yunyang did not stay for long. He left after exchanging a few words and understanding Shangguan Lingxiu's purpose of coming. To Yunyang, there was nothing more important than confirming whether the assassin who had fallen in Zio was old Dugu. Even if the other side was related to the Shangguan family of generals and Shangguan Wudi, compared to a dead man, it was better to take care of the living first. Watching Yunyang leave, Shangguan Lingxiu stood at the side of the ship, biting her plump lips as a strange feeling rose within her. This Lord Supreme Wind doesn't seem to have any contact with me previously, but why does he seem to be very familiar with me? Also, why do I feel that this Lord Supreme Wind is very familiar as well? Who was it that made me feel this sense of familiarity? Shangguan Lingxiu faced the wind, her hair fluttering as a thought rose within her. Although this Lord Supreme Wind has never shown his true face, he should be someone I know. Inexplicably, Shangguan Lingxiu's flustered heart had calmed down considerably regarding this trip to the Empire of Zio. The ship was still moving forward steadily. I'll take a nap first, Shangguan Lingxiu thought quietly. She had been thinking about how to deal with the situation for the past few days, but now she seemed to have suddenly relaxed. The fatigue that had accumulated previously surged forth at once. She had to rest quickly and recuperate. Yun Yang traveled with the speed of the wind and entered the water to cultivate the holy water charm. Naturally, his speed was much faster than the ship. Therefore, Yun Yang arrived at Zilong City after just over a day's time. However, once he arrived at Zilong City, his expression changed drastically. He realized that the entire Zilong City had become a zone of spiritual control. In other words, the atmosphere of the entire Zilong City was exactly the same as when the 9 Supremes had been ambushed. Under such circumstances, even Yun Yang, whose cultivation base had improved tremendously, had to enter the city in his physical form if he wanted to use the manifestation of the 9 Supremes. Back then, it was only Tianshan Cliff that was targeted at the 9 Supremes. Now the entire Zilong City was filled with such an atmosphere. Yun Yang stood 50 miles away, frowning as he looked at Zilong City, his expression darkening. While Yun Yang was feeling anxious, there was also a huge doubt in his mind. The activation of the Empire of Zio's spiritual restraining formation was obviously targeted. Once the formation was activated, no cultivator in the entire Zilong City would be able to absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. In other words, as long as the formation was not withdrawn, all the martial artists within the Purple Dragon City's range would stop at their current level. Unless he fled far away and left Zilong City. However, Yun Yang had to enter Zilong City before he could confirm the assassin's identity. Yun Yang came to the conclusion that the Zilong City in front of him was a trap. Furthermore, it was a trap specifically targeted at him. An overt plot. An overt plot against him. It was not that Yun Yang was worrying for nothing, but the current situation was already set in stone. This was definitely a trap. The spirit restraining formation in front of him covered the entire Zilong City. How big of a deal was this? And who was the one who created this formation? Controlling the entire Zilong City. This was a large-scale city with a population of more than 4 million. What kind of conditions would it take to completely control spirits? Yun Yang was now doubting whether the Empire of Zio's treasury could have so many spiritual control resources. Could it afford such a consumption? The news of the capture of the assassin came first, followed by such a setup. In addition, such a setup was targeted at the 9 Supremes. There would never be such a grand setup in the entire continent, other than targeting the 9 Supremes. What was more, it was happening in the Empire's capital. Therefore Yun Yang was certain of one thing. The person they had captured must be old Dugu. Other than that, there was no other choice. No matter what method had been used to find out about the relationship between old Dugu and the 9 Supremes. Therefore this formation had been set up. Therefore it had to be a trap. It was definitely a trap. However, Yun Yang's problem was that even though he knew that it was a trap for him, he still had to enter it. No matter what the reason was. Whether it was old Dugu who had leaked the news or not, Yun Yang had to save the person first. Yun Yang had a deep understanding of torture. He firmly believed in one thing. If the torture had reached a certain point, the secret would not have been kept. The human body could not withstand such a punishment. Especially in a situation where one could not die even if they wanted to. Even if it was my father who leaked the news, I won't blame him at all. I'll save the old man and let him enjoy his old age in peace. Yun Yang's gaze was fiery. Because this is my family. Even if I have to sacrifice myself, I'll save my family. I won't have the slightest resentment. Since I've long decided to save him even if I have to sacrifice myself, what's the big deal if he leaked some news? If it wasn't him who leaked it, the Empire of Zio would have to pay a terrible price. I swear. I know it's a little old-fashioned of me to do this, but my brother's family, my brother's father, is my father. Yun Yang sucked in a soft breath. I'll do whatever it takes. The question now was, how was he going to get in? This was the first hurdle. In the past, Yun Yang had various cultivation methods to protect himself, so he could easily sneak in no matter how treacherous the environment was. Now, however, this wishful thinking was fated to fail. No matter which cultivation method of the 9 Supremes it was difficult to unleash it under the current spiritual restraining formation, let alone sneak in. On the contrary, if he were to forcefully use it, he would only expose his whereabouts. It would be useless and detrimental. The most basic requirement to enter the city gate was to have a travel permit. However, Yun Yang did not have the Empire of Zio's travel permit. If he were to enter Zilong City with his original appearance, even if he would not be surrounded by enemies like when the 9 Supremes sneaked in, he would still become a target and a focal point. What was Yun Yang, the son of a marquis of the Empire of Yutong, a famed popinjay, suddenly coming to Zilong City? Especially at such a critical juncture. Was it not thought-provoking, and thought-provoking? If someone were to connect the dots, they might even be able to come up with something. Just the fact that Yun Yang could escape unscathed from the Four Seasons Tower's four venerable lords' encirclement and even save the target that the four venerable lords wanted to kill was already shocking enough. Furthermore, although few people knew of Yun Yang's cultivation base and it was not in the eyes of Mr. Nian, the four venerable lords or Lei Dong Tian, he was already a true heaven realm cultivator. He was a level higher than the 10th perfection realm of this world's cultivators, which was publicly acknowledged by the secular world of Tianshan continent. The Empire of Ziyou's officials should not only be surprised by the arrival of such a pinnacle expert in Zilong City, they should be horrified. Looking at the east gate of Zilong City that was shrouded in the morning fog, Yun Yang suddenly felt that the place was like a giant mouth that was about to devour him. Once he entered, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to come out again. Even with a cultivation base that was enough to look down on the world, he still did not have much sense of security. Yun Yang stared at it for a while, sucked in a breath and turned around quietly. Even if I can't come out alive after entering, I want to go in. Chapter 392. Putting aside how to enter Zilong City. While Yun Yang was burning with anxiety, he was also relieved. Trap. Since it was a trap, there must be bait. Yun Yang was absolutely sure that the bait was still there, which was why they dared to do this. Otherwise, it would be impossible. Without the bait, what trap was there to talk about? Therefore, Yun Yang was relieved about old Dugu's situation. Can't I go in if you set up the formation? Must I be caught if I go in? How naive. Looking at the city gate from afar, the seemingly ordinary but actually guarded by deific senses, a cold glint flashed across Yun Yang's eyes. There was a forest 2,000 miles away from Zilong City. The mountain range here was continuous and it was filled with dense forests. There were few people here. Because of this place had become a haven for mystical beasts. Of course, it was also a haven for mystical beast hunters, buyers and bounty hunters. It was often said that heaven and hell were neighbors, but it was a textbook interpretation here. It was indeed so. Every day there would be countless Shen beast hunters entering this mountain forest with all kinds of goals. However, there were also countless mystical beast hunters who fell in this forest every day. It was just that very few people dared to enter the core of this forest. Rumor had it that 9th-level mystical beasts often appeared here, making it an extremely dangerous place. Even a famous 10th perfection Grandmaster powerhouse would have his life in danger if he came here. Ordinary martial artists would naturally stay away from this place. Everyone hunted and preyed on beasts at the border, bringing back a few low-level mystical beasts to make ends meet. Those who were lucky could bring back mystical beast cubs to sell and earn a huge sum of money in the blink of an eye. Mystical beast cubs had always been popular in the buyer's market. Even a 3rd or 4th level mystical beast was highly sought after by the aristocrats. Mystical beasts were born with innate intelligence. They were much smarter than ordinary wild beasts. If they were tamed well, their intelligence would be comparable to a 7 or 8-year-old child. Keeping a beautiful and obedient mystical beast by one's side had long since become a popular trend among the nobles of the continent. It was a means of comparison. Yun Yang spent 6 hours asking around before he morphed into his wind form and snuck into the forest quietly. He advanced forward without any reservations, his target going straight for the most dangerous area. With Yun Yang's current cultivation base and manifestation ability, traversing the jungle, including the deepest and most dangerous areas, was a piece of cake. 2 hours later, the two 9th-level beginner mystical beasts that lived next to each other in the depths of the forest but did not see eye to eye with each other had both been subdued by Yun Yang. As far as the eye could see, a giant python that was 30 to 40 feet thick and over 200 feet long with brightly colored skin and a gigantic black bear that was 80 feet tall and as strong as a city wall were crouching before Yun Yang's feet. At this moment, the two high-level dark beasts, a bear and a snake, could only shiver from head to toe. There wasn't the slightest trace of unruliness in their fierce eyes, only boundless terror. The black bear and the python said in unison, "I have never seen such a fierce person in my life." Among the two high-level mystical beasts, the black bear was the first to suffer. This Niello bear was one of the two hegemons of this jungle. As long as there was no provocation from a formidable opponent, its favorite thing to do was to lie down comfortably and bask in the sun, or to touch prettier female bears for exercise. Today, however, the stars of misfortune had fallen from the sky. The bear that was basking in the sun suddenly felt its vision darken as a human landed in front of it. The Niello bear's first thought was that its eyes were playing tricks on it. Or perhaps it was too comfortable basking in the sun that it had entered a dream. Furthermore, it was a beautiful dream. Otherwise, how could its favorite food appear so casually in its mouth? It slapped out almost instinctively, but it was this slap that started the bear's tragedy. The scenes were unbearable to recall. Faced with the bear's paw, the human did not retreat but advanced instead, charging forward to engage in close combat. Before the yellow bear could show that it was unprepared, its left eye was punched heavily. The force of this punch was King immense. The yellow bear's massive body, which weighed 7,300 kilograms, was beaten until it tumbled over. The bear was dumbfounded on the spot. Are you King human? How can your strength be greater than mine? Could it be that this delicacy is not that easy to eat? The yellow bear was waiting for its counterattack, trying its best to get the delicacy in front of it, but it saw the human attack a second time, grabbing the black bear and giving it a good beating. Punching the flesh was only the lowest level. Each punch was heavier than the one before, fiercer than the one before, fiercer than the one before, and fiercer than the one before. The pain pierced through the heart and lungs, and the pain was like a wave, surging wave after wave. After a series of punches and kicks, the black bear was completely knocked out. In the end, it simply covered its head, stuck out its buttocks and braced itself, relying on its rough skin and thick flesh, hoping that it could withstand this vicious beating. However, the other party's brutality seemed to have no end. After a few more blows, the bear felt as if stars were coming out of its eyes. Up until this moment, the bear was still confused. It could not speak, only howling. It really could not understand. Why was that? How did I offend you? Why did you hit me like this? Even if I wanted to eat you, I had already taken action, but I did not succeed. Is there a need to do this to me? This is going to take this bear's old life. Also, this sudden delicacy really wasn't human at all. With a kick to his stomach, he couldn't help but fly up. Flying was a skill that this bear had yearned for a long time. However, there were also different types of flying, and there were differences. No matter what, this bear was not willing to fly like this. Now, it was sent flying by someone. After flying hundreds of feet in the air, it was kicked again. Its internal organs felt as if they had turned upside down, and for the first time in its life, it felt like vomiting. This happened again and again, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. After being kicked for 17 or 18 times, with a loud bang, the yellow bear finally felt its feet on the ground again. Yes, that was not right. It was the feeling of its body landing on the ground. That was not right. There should have been an impact when its body landed on the ground. There should have been the feeling of being shaken by the earth. Why did it only feel soft and comfortable? The bear opened its eyes and realized that there were more than 10 large pythons under its body. It was these 10 large pythons that acted as a buffer for it. Of course, these 10 large pythons were all finished. They were all crushed to death. However, the death of these 10 pythons was not the yellow bear's focus. The bear's first thought was, "Oh my God, I have been beaten all the way, and I have been beaten all the way to the territory of my nemesis. This is the end. Behind me is the violent delicacy, and in front of me is my nemesis Duan Shen. After being beaten up, I have little strength left. There is no way to survive. Isn't this a dead end?" Just as the bear had predicted, a hissing sound came from beside him. The only two top-notch mystical beasts, the moar python, rushed out ferociously. The moar python said, "Bear, you are courting death. How dare you come to my territory with such great fanfare? We have been living in harmony for so many years. It is not that I do not want to touch you. It is just that you can't beat me and I can't beat you either. Sometimes when we are full, we will fight and communicate, create some commotion, and defend our current authority. But today, did you not take your medicine? Did you forget to take your medicine? Did you take the wrong medicine? Or did you take fake medicine? Not only did you cause the forest to be filled with dust and smoke, you even barged into my house and sat on my many beloved concubines to death. This is intolerable. Who can tolerate this? Not even a snake." The moar python opened its huge mouth with a swoosh, ready to teach its nemesis an unforgettable lesson. If this bite were to land with the bear's current physical condition, there was absolutely no room for him to dodge. He might even die in one bite. However, at the moment when the bear's life was in danger, the moar python's body suddenly stiffened. The tail of the moar python had been grabbed firmly. The moar python did not have time to think about what had happened. It suddenly felt itself rising up. It flew at a high speed and then landed with a loud bang. The head of the moar python became the first landing point, and the landing target was impressively. The yellow bear opened its eyes wide, looking at the brutal delicacy with extreme horror. One of its hands had grabbed the tail of the moir python, and the moir python, which was more than 200 feet long, was used as a whip. After making a circle in the air, the moir python came down on the bear. What happened next was tragic. The heads of the bear and the snake had an unprecedented intimate contact. Both beasts felt dizzy and had a splitting headache at the same time. The black bear's first attack was like a huge baseball flying out rapidly. However, it caught a glimpse of the horrifying delicacy, the horrifying humanoid monster with the newly formed python whip, catching up to it. Boom boom boom. By the time Yunyang had vented all the negative emotions that had accumulated during this period of time and finally stopped, the yellow bear was sprawled on the ground, gasping for air and dying. Its two huge eyes were filled with fear that had reached the breaking point, and it dared not move. As for the newly formed python whip, the moir python had long been thrown off its joints. Its condition was even worse than the bear's. It lay on the ground, gasping and coughing, spitting out mouthfuls of blood from time to time. What was worse was the dizziness. Even when it had returned to the ground, it could still feel the earth spinning rapidly. Spinning. Spinning again. Ugh. The moir python opened its mouth abruptly this time, spitting out a puddle of emerald green stuff. Oh my god, did it shatter my gallbladder? Chapter 393. After a long time, when the dizziness faded slightly, the bear and the snake felt two tree branches under their necks, lifting their heads up. Without waiting for the tree branches to exert force, the bear and the snake lifted their heads obediently, gazing at the front with deep affection, taking in the world in their eyes once again. There was only one person in front of them. This person seemed really small in their eyes, the kind that could swallow a dozen of them in one gulp. It was this person who was squatting on the tree branch in front of them in an amiable manner. Hiss, hiss, the yellow bear and the moir python lowered their heads at the same time. This was an act of begging for mercy, an act of submission. The storm-like attack just now had made these two rulers of the jungle feel the fear of being dominated by an unstoppable force. They knew that they were no match for the human in front of them. If they did not submit, they would lose their lives. This had exceeded the understanding of the two kings of mystical beasts towards the upper limit of a human's power. The human figure in front of them was definitely not a human but a devil. It was too terrifying. Do you submit? Yunyang asked with an amiable expression. His attitude and tone were simply too amiable. The bear and the snake nodded furiously when they heard him. As ninth-level mystical beasts, they could already understand human language despite only being at the beginner ninth level. Even if they could not, they could still distinguish the meaning of mental strength. At a time like this, if he still tried to be brave and said something like, "I'd rather die than accept this," then he would really have to say goodbye to this beautiful world. Yunyang frowned, feeling rather dissatisfied. Both of you are too big. This state makes me feel very uncomfortable. I actually have to lift my head to talk to both of you. It's so tiring. How can I not be tired? How could he not be tired? The most direct choice was to kill the two beasts. Naturally, he would not need to lift his head to talk. It was the simplest way of thinking. Hiss, the yellow bear's huge body trembled abruptly, its size shrinking instantly. It trembled again and shrunk another size. After trembling for 17 to 18 times, its size had become no different from an ordinary black bear, its eyes looking at Yunyang pitifully. Obviously, this was already its maximum size in its normal state. Yunyang shook his head resolutely. It's still too big. I want to look down on you. Do you understand? The yellow bear whimpered in aggrievement. Left with no other choice, it gritted its teeth and shook with all its might. Its entire body emitted a wave of intense bone-cracking sounds, and a wave of yellow misty brilliance was emitted from its body. As the light faded, a 3-foot-long furry miniature bear appeared before Yunyang. Its wet nose and adorable demeanor were sprawled on the ground, looking up at Yunyang. That's not bad. You have some awareness. Here's a reward for you. Yunyang was satisfied and extended his leg. The yellow bear ran over to receive its reward and stuck out its tongue to lick the devil's shoes clean. Roll. Schwa. Jump. Schwa. Jump with one leg. Buff. Yunyang was delighted. Not bad at all. You can stand aside now. I'll give you your reward later. The yellow bear felt as if it had been pardoned. It scurried to Yunyang's left and lay down in an exceptionally obedient and adorable position. Yunyang lifted his leg and the yellow bear crawled over cleverly, letting the devil's leg rest on its head so that the devil could feel more comfortable. As for the dignity of the mystical beast king, what was that? The yellow bear expressed that it was not important at all compared to the fear of being dominated by the devil. It was insignificant. If one's life was about to be forfeited, why would one care about dignity? As long as this bear could live, even if it had to eat *t, it could be considered and it would gladly endure. Yun Yang hummed in satisfaction at the bear's attitude, making the yellow bear feel intoxicated. Yun Yang turned to look at the moor python and frowned. Why are you still so big? Do you want me to continue looking up at you? The moor python was so frightened that its gallbladder had shattered. It looked at Yun Yang with pleading eyes, its head the size of a house smashing the ground desperately. After so many years of life, it knew that humans needed to kowtow when they begged for mercy. It was kowtowing now. Thump, 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 hiss, hiss, hiss. The moor python desperately released its mental energy to explain. The snake was scared to death. The look in its eyes was too ferocious. Are you saying that you can shrink as well? It's just that all the joints in your body have been dislocated by me? That's why you can't shrink? Are you lying to me? How could there be such a restriction? Yun Yang tilted his head, his eyes filled with doubt. The moor python nodded its head desperately. There was no longer any viciousness or malice in its initially ferocious and indifferent eyes. Instead, they were filled with sincerity, pity, fear, and despair. If that's the case, it'll be easy. Yun Yang flew up. Boom. He kicked the moor python's body. Behind him, the 3-foot-tall miniature bear shuddered subconsciously. Its old rival, the moor python that weighed tens of thousands of caddies, had actually been kicked into the air. Why am I surprised? Didn't the devil whip me with the moor python just now? But, a creature that only knew how to hiss for its entire life had actually let out a cry of agony after being kicked. What was going on? Furthermore, it was clearly that hateful python that had suffered an inhumane and crazy beating in front of him. Why would this bear feel as if he had experienced it himself? The terrifying devil had kicked the python a total of 108 times. It felt like it had been kicked 108 times as well. What was even more terrifying was that during this period, the python had not landed on the ground at all. It had been flying in the air. Yes, it had been kicked into the air. The yellow bear's eyes were filled with horror. Oh my mother bear! I actually had the involuntary feeling of being dominated by the devil again. The indescribable fear. This was too horrifying. Poof. The moor python finally landed on the ground. Its appearance was already too horrible to look at. Are you done? Yun Yang asked gently. You're not bad. You actually have 108 joints of bones. That's quite a lot. The moor python, which had regained its freedom of movement, did not dare to have the slightest hesitation. With a whoosh, its entire body coiled into a huge snake formation. Then, with all its strength, a layer of misty green light encircled its body. The huge snake formation immediately shrank at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Slowly, its body had shrunk into a small, ordinary python that was only a few feet long. It then released the snake formation and laid its entire body flat on the ground. It lifted its snake head in a flattering manner and looked up at a certain someone. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Yun Yang nodded. Not bad, not bad. However, legend has it that when the moor python has grown to 108 joints, there will be a luminous pearl in each joint? Are they all priceless treasures? The moor python's entire body was stiff. It looked at the devil in front of it in horror. It trembled all over and let out a sorrowful hiss from its mouth. The snake head that had shrunk to the size of a fist pounded on the ground desperately. Spare me. I like luminous pearls. Yun Yang said, but I prefer obedient ones. The moor python and the yellow bear cried out anxiously at the same time, trying their best to show that they were obedient, that they were the most obedient. I need to see evidence of obedience. Yun Yang smiled in satisfaction. For example, can the both of you be a little smaller? The moor python and the yellow bear revealed a look of desperation at the same time. Just when Yun Yang thought that these two fellows actually had a backbone and wanted to fight to the death, he heard two puffs. Another beam of yellow light and a green gas dispersed at the same time. The bear and the snake had shrunk a lot at the same time. The yellow bear was only 2 feet tall now, smaller than an ordinary black bear cub. It was impossible to tell that it was a bear tyrant. As for the moor python, it had shrunk to the size of a finger and was 3 to 4 feet long. However, it was still rather dazzling with its golden glow. Only then did Yun Yang smile in satisfaction. Now it's really not bad. How pleasing to the eye. How cute and cute. He was much stronger than the fiendish demeanor he had displayed just now. Don't the both of you have any sense of aesthetics? The bear and the snake were filled with helplessness. If they dared to cry, they would definitely bawl out loud. We're mystical beasts. What's the use of being pleasing to the eye and cute? That kind of miserable feeling filled his heart from beginning to end. This was the result of them having lost too much of their life force and forcefully shrunk back. After this incident, if he wanted to return to his original level, he would probably need at least 20 years of cultivation. In other words, this devil had made the two kings of the mystical beasts lose more than 10% of their combat power with just a single sentence. Don't be so aggrieved. Come, I'll give you something good to eat. As long as the both of you are obedient, there will be more in the future. Yun Yang casually sent out 2 balls of rich vitality, one for each of them without any bias. When the bear and the snake saw the pure ball of vitality coming towards them, all 4 of their eyes widened in shock. They were dumbstruck. Oh my God! What was this? With a flash of golden light, the moir python had already swallowed its own ball of chi. When it turned its head and glared at the moir python, it realized that the mini bear had already swallowed the ball of chi with its 2 claws. Good stuff. It was really good stuff. It was just a ball of vitality, but it had already made up for all the losses just now, including the loss of being beaten, the loss of being forced to transform, the loss of internal organs, the loss of scales. All of it had been made up for, and there was even some left over. At once, the way the bear and the snake looked at Yin Yang was completely different. A pair of snake's eyes and a pair of bear's eyes were glowing with a fervent light. Big brother, why didn't you show off such a good thing earlier? If you did, you wouldn't have to do it yourself. We would have been convinced right away. You could have done it earlier, why didn't you? You'd done it earlier, you're good, we're good too. It's a pity that we got beaten up. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.